The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. Like-minded. Got a wonderful house today. This is awesome. This is, I think, the biggest turnout we had of SEAC. So welcome, members and all our guests, and thank you for being here. How are you? We've got a pretty full agenda this morning, so anticipate some really good discussions and some really good questions and comments. And I encourage all of you to, if anybody has a question or just raise your hand and we'll go from there. So kick things off, I know there's a lot of new people here. I just want to give you a little background on the Solar Energy Action Committee. First of all, Hector Bordas, head of building and safety in the county unincorporated area. I serve the unincorporated area for 16 cities. And I'm also the lead on SEAC and facilitator. And then we'll go around the room in a minute so everybody can introduce themselves. I just want to give you a little more background. This committee was formed a little over a year ago. It was formed tasked by the County Department of Public Works. And the reason we did that, where's Mustafa? Over here. Hi, Mustafa. This was Mustafa's idea, and some of the challenges that the county was facing was, this industry is changing so rapidly, and the technology is evolving so fast, and there's so many different products out there, and contractors and utilities and testing labs, you name it. And at the county, we were facing a lot of issues in terms of how do we deal with the situation and new products and standards and code issues. What does this mean or doesn't mean? And we wanted to come up with those answers, and Mustafa said, why don't we just bring industry and we'll just have these one-on-one chats to help the county. And so we said, wait a second, so that's good, but I bet that the issues that we were facing are the same issues that all of us here were facing. So we said, why don't we bring everybody together and bring representatives from all of industry into one room, and let's come up with some top issues to address. And we did that. And the folks that are part of this committee, they really appreciate what they do, the time that they put into this, their insight and the perspectives that we have, and the time, critical time, because folks here are incredibly busy. And over the last year, we have tackled a few things, some of it related to AB 2188, and we're looking at a whole series of utility questions that you'll hear some of it today. And we also, one of the top things that we were going to look at was also UL 2703, and what does that mean? How do you apply that, and how do you, does everybody understand what the standard is in development? So a little bit more on the committee. I don't think you guys have this. It's our draft operating guidelines. But I just want to share a few things about what we believe are successful outcomes. To develop and maintain an active and strong collaborative and bidirectional relationship with solar stakeholders, associations, and organizations. Support, assist, communicate, and continually improve the solar community in the application of existing and potential standards and guidelines. Talk about standards, we're not talking about usual standards. We're talking, just how we operate. Facilitate the exchange and use of information and knowledge for the solar community. Provide leadership and development of selective solar initiatives to benefit industry as a whole. When we use the term industry, we're being very inclusive. It's not only the private sector, but also the public sector. So the HJs, the cities, and the counties. So when we talk about industry, we're talking about everybody. Research, receive, identify, or determine potential solar subject matter of benefit to the solar industry. Evaluate, approve, and enforce solar initiatives and subject matter. So that kind of gives you kind of the big picture of what we believe are the successful outcomes. And it all comes down just to communication, breaking those communication barriers down to the silo, and having those discussions that sometimes can be very conflicting discussions, and opinions can vary tremendously. But in the end, we agree to a solution, and we do that through consensus. And some of you may or may not be familiar with the process. Some folks are right on board. Hey, they totally agree. Some say, hey, you know, I don't necessarily agree with that, but I'm going to step to the side for the good of the industry and we'll move forward. Just a meeting guidelines and principles. I'm just going to share a few with you. Everyone participates. No one dominates. Seek unity, not separation. Disagree without being disagreeable. Speak honestly. Critique ideas, not people. Respect each other's thinking and value their contributions. That from the side of the room. Everyone.
Well, it was the dominating part that I was laughing at.
Oh, that's you.
Yeah. That's why I was laughing.
John Tacker. Everyone supports the decisions that are made. So that kind of gives you a big picture overview of the committee. So I welcome all the new folks, and let's go around and introduce.
Mustafa Kashay, LA County.
Dave McLean, City of Los Angeles.
Sparky Cullen, City of Calabasas. Pete Jackson, City of Bakersfield. John Tacker, UL.
Tiffany Maycomber, County of Gas and Electric.
Patrick Healy, County of San Diego.
Justin Rourke, Everett Solar Systems.
Nick Hawley at SEAC.
Evelyn Butler, Solar Energy Industries Association.
Jeff Spees, Quickmount PV and Calcia. Mark Baldessari, Enphase Energy.
Sammy Gansu, SunPower.
Paula Mellon, the SEAC Administrator. And this is our Hello. Oh, no. I just wanted to announce that she's our new admin assistant, but I'll do that a bit later.
Cody Norman, Mike Tyson, Barango Solar. Eddie Garcia, Dynasty Builders. Andy Michelle, I'm with Everest Solar. Arnold, from SunPower. Ryan Keeley, also from SunPower.
Hi, my name is Gail Springler from
Jim Cahill, Solar City. Mike Galvez, Solar City. Tom Young, you're right. Devin McCroskey, Electric Solar. Edgar DeSera, Texas Solar. Tommy Clement, Shaw, Solar City, and Test Solar. Wilson O'Gara, Rooftech. Dan One, Pro Solar. Ticker out, Pro Solar. Welcome. Evelyn, welcome. Glad that you're here today.
Thank you.
And online we have Alan Fields, Bill Brooks, and Don Hughes.
And then we also have James Cormington, Patrick Cosavani, Sunny Ray, Craig Pine, Benjamin Levin.
Okay. So all our meetings are recorded, and eventually we may put them out for the public if they want to go back and listen to 4 hours. The mics, if you guys want to speak, we don't have any mics back there. They're all around here, around the table. So you're welcome to come up here if you like. If not, you know, just speak a little louder from the back. And Paul, ready to go?
Yeah. All right. All right. So welcome everyone. Well, this group is getting bigger by the minute, I think, or maybe by the second. Some announcements that I'd like to make today is obviously we have a new admin assistant. You want to stand up? Thank you, everyone. This is Michelle Nunez, and she's our new admin assistant, so you'll probably likely be hearing from both of us going forward. So welcome, Michelle. Thank you. And then some housekeeping announcements. For those of you, if this is your first meeting, it's pretty a long and intense meeting, so it goes for about 4 hours. We do break round about noon for about 15 minutes, and there are light snacks at the back of the room, so please help yourself. And then the restrooms are located outside these main doors. The woman is to the right, and the men's are to the left.
So all men's that way?
Oh, sorry. And the woman's is right here. Okay. And then we do have Wi-Fi, and it's under DPW guest. No password required, those of you who are new. And then a quick update, we had our second SEAC webinar. It was held on April the 20th. We had another awesome turnout, and thank you to Don and Ellen for being our guest speakers on that. We got some really positive responses and reviews. And then also a very special thanks to Jim Cahill and his team. They did an awesome job with taking our utility, small residential PV issues we had as kind of the last meeting. It was all in one document, and there were about several different issues, and Jim and his team were very kind enough to split the issues out, and we've shared them again on Google Docs, so we'll be going through that at this meeting. And then we would also like to reach out to all of you to let us know if you know of any student workers that can help facilitate with some of the SEAC goals. There's some action items that we really need some help on. Every meeting that we come to, our list of issues grows. And so if any of you do know of any interns or students that would like to help us, that would be great. Please either email Michelle and myself. Thank you. And then on to the agenda item number 3. We'd like to approve the meeting summary from last meeting on March the 24th.
Is there a motion to approve?
Jeff Speed's motions.
Second. Discussion, comments, questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Approved.
Thank you. All right, and then we're going to be shifting over to Bill Brooks, who's going to give a talk on the NEC 2017 and 2014. There's a lot of content to cover, so Bill's going to kindly just give a great overview on everything, and his presentations will be shared after this meeting with everyone.
All right.
Everybody knows Bill Brooks, right? Morning, Bill.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Very good. Let's see. Let's make sure that the play's on the proper monitor. All right. Can you see that?
Nope. Not yet. We're still checking, making some adjustments.
See it online.
Michelle. We can pretend we see it.
Yeah, and you guys don't want my webcam, right? I mean, that's you know what I look like. So.
Way too early, Bill. Yeah. I haven't had my coffee yet, Bill.
Seriously. It could wake you up, but that's I took a red eye into New England on my birthday on Tuesday, and then had some good meetings with the insurance industry folks, travelers, and FM Global. Then taught yesterday in Boston, and flew back yesterday evening. Got back around a little before midnight. So,
what a great way to spend your birthday.
We can take
it was awesome.
So, Bill, this is Tacker. I'm just going to say something. So, our committee meetings are not a real meeting until we have technical difficulties. So the members will be here, they know that practically every single meeting we have a problem.
I have a legitimate question before we start. Hey, Bill, what's the status of California's code adoption? Are they going in 2014 before 2017?
Yes, yeah. The state of California adopts the 2014 as the 2016 California Electrical Code on January 1 of 2017. And so we will talk a little bit about 2014 code adoption, and of course, one of the most important parts of that is the fact that rapid shutdown of conductors leaving the array are part of the 2014 code and will be adopted in the state of California.
Actually, Bill, I'm not sure. I think it's already that it's adopted. The fact is that it's enforced on January 1st of 2017. I think is actually more accurate because it's already been adopted by the California Building Standards Commission. And it's, and it's, as I remember, it's they adopt it, then they publish it, and then it's enforced come January 1st, 2017.
Right.
And any jurisdiction can do any further amendments. They just can't make them more restrictive. They cannot make them less restrictive. They can make them more restrictive, but they cannot make them less restrictive.
Right. But they can use alternative means and methods, alternative methods.
There's a process for that, yeah.
Okay, I think we're ready to go, Bill. Go ahead.
Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes. Well,
Okay.
you can see your PowerPoint.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't want you to see the rest of my screen. Okay, so I've been asked to talk about the 2017 code and the 2014 code and have 30 minutes. So this is going to be the evening news sound bites about everything you need to know. The 2017 code definitely has had the biggest number of changes in 690 since it was adopted in 1984. The article was reduced, just for some statistics, from about 11,000 words to about 8,000 words, and 1,100 of those 8,000 words are rapid shutdown. Rapid shutdown was a fairly short section of 133 words, and it's been expanded to 1,100 words, and so that's a big change. DC loads, standalone systems, which are AC loads, and battery storage systems, which have historically been part of Article 690, have been moved out of 690 into their own articles. We now have the energy storage system article, Article 706, standalone systems, Article 710. Microgrids are part of Article 705, Part 4, a new Part 4, and DC microgrids are Article 712. So lots of action. And these sections were all removed from 690 completely, and with essentially just references to these locations. That does not mean that the code did not talk about energy storage systems prior to the 2017 code at all. In fact, Article 480 on storage batteries and Article 690 made up the lion's share of what went into Article 706. So there's quite a bit of material in the photovoltaic articles 690 in the 2014 code, and there are some things in 480 that are also of importance for HJs as well. One of the key parts of this whole paring down, if you will, of Article 690 was getting down to a very discrete definition of a photovoltaic system. And instead of essentially encompassing the world, a photovoltaic system is a very constrained system now that only essentially is a power system. And we define that power system where it starts and stops based upon the photovoltaic system disconnecting means. And so we added several figures to illustrate where a photovoltaic system starts and stops, and these are not an exhaustive list of figures, or there are plenty of other configurations that could be put together. The key issue with a PV system disconnecting means is that when you're standing at the PV system disconnecting means, if you look toward the solar panels, the solar array, there is nothing but PV system in those conductors. Connected to those conductors. If we look in the opposite direction, away from the PV array, toward, say, the service entrance, if it's the utility interconnected system, there are other systems involved in the conductors and the wiring. And so that disconnecting means separates the PV system from all other conductors of any other electrical system. And that's a key point that was, it certainly has been talked about in previous versions of the code, but was never really clarified to that extent. And so here we see the simple interactive system, and of course the AC circuit breaker, for instance, could be the PV system disconnecting means in that case. AC module system, same way. We'll move on to the next one. As that comes up, we see a DC coupled multi-mode system, and these systems are still being done today. They were very common back in the Y2K era. There were literally thousands of these systems that went into the state of California, battery-based systems, multimodal, and everything in that picture in the 2014 code is considered part of a PV system. Everything in that picture is a PV system. Now, the only thing in that PV system is in the top left corner. All right, the PV system disconnect in this particular case is a DC disconnecting means. And so there could be 1 to 6 of these DC disconnects that have to be grouped together or in the same enclosure, and that becomes the PV system disconnecting means. It separates it from the energy storage system, from any DC loads that you might have, and from the multimodal inverter. We also have something called an interactive system disconnect, which has been defined in Article 705, which is the interconnection of these various power sources. Could have 6 or 8 power sources, all going into a multimodal system and having an interconnection with the utility. And then, of course, a multimodal system, the reason we call it multimodal is it also has a standalone system mode and has essentially two AC outputs, one that goes to the grid, that's the interactive disconnect, and one that goes to the standalone system side. All right, another permutation on this is an AC coupled system. In this case, the interactive inverter that's connected to the PV array is part of the PV system. That's a required piece of the PV system, and therefore the PV system disconnect is on the AC side of that interactive inverter, but is upstream of the standalone systems and is upstream of the multimodal inverter and, of course, the energy storage system and the utility. Okay. Again, previously, everything in that picture was considered a PV system. Everything. Okay. The next thing is standalone systems. Standalone systems obviously do not have a connection to the utility if they're strictly standalone and no multimodal action to them at all. And they may have DC loads. They generally have an energy storage system, don't have to. And of course they have loads. If it has AC loads, as this picture shows, then we have standalone AC loads as well. And the PV system disconnect is prior to the interconnection with and the interaction with the DC system, the energy storage system and the DC loads. So any questions about that? It's a fundamental shift. It's a shift that we needed to do because we got so many different energy sources coming down the road. We need to segment them accordingly and make sure we keep them straight. And then we have this whole new challenge of how do we bring them all together in a multimodal system that could have, as I said, up to 6 or 8 different energy sources connected to the same inverter. All right, I'm going to keep moving because we will have questions at the end. And I just recently put together an article for Solar Pro magazine on the changes in the 2017 code. And we didn't go completely exhaustive in this article, but we did put together a table that summarizes the vast number of changes that are in this version. The first of which starts right out at the scope. The big change in the scope is that large-scale electric supply systems are removed from 690 and moved into Article 691, new Article 691. These are large-scale plants that are essentially connected for power production purposes only. They do not have, they're not supplying loads directly. They're supplying power directly into the utility system. They're a minimum of 5 megawatts, and they're generally much larger than that. It doesn't mean that the construction of a 1 megawatt plant couldn't look very much like a 5, 10, or 5,000 megawatt plant. It's just been set as a basic criteria and moving forward, and it has the requirements for the documentation of these systems for larger scale projects. These larger scale projects are engineered projects that are heavily governed by the financing agencies and the like. And this 691, without going into a lot of detail because we don't have time right now to talk about it, talks about the documentation from independent engineering that's required to be provided to the AHJ upon their request. And So these are fully documented systems, and the documentation, essentially, a lot of the documentation will be related to what types of alternative methods may be used to Article 690. Article 690 and the National Electrical Code in general was really designed for governing electrical systems around buildings and electrical services and things like that. And so with the expansion of photovoltaics to a very large scale, there were a lot of things that really needed to be clarified so that Article 690 was not being used to govern every aspect of a large power plant. All right, we just looked at some of the new figures that are in there, and then there's a variety of new definitions on DC to DC converter circuits, source and output circuits related to DC to DC converters, with the I guess the explosion of companies like Solar Edge. I believe they're now the largest residential inverter manufacturer in the United States, which is a pretty big deal. So those circuits, there's a lot of things that we talk about in Article 690 that relate to these circuits as well as PV source and output circuits. And so rather than saying DC to DC converter source circuits, DC to DC converter output circuits, PV source circuits, and PV output circuits, we came up with a new term called PV system DC circuit. And that basically is all 4 of those types of circuits, and it's essentially 4 words instead of 30 words. We have a definition for generating capacity. Inverter input-output circuit is a new definition. The old definition was very wordy and actually not even accurate in all cases. And so now the definition of inverter input circuit is simply conductors connected to the input of the inverter, and the inverter output circuit is conductors connected to the output of an inverter. Very simple. And then, of course, we're going to talk about functional grounded PV systems, and that's a fundamental reorganization of the understanding of how we ground PV systems and how we've been doing it for the last 18 years or more. All right, 694D talks about changes the wording from multiple inverters to multiple PV systems, because the reality is on a building we can have multiple separate PV systems connected to the building, and this clarifies what the rules are for that, and when we're connecting them to locations other than the service entrance, Article 705.10 tells us that we have to have a directory at each location. 690.5 and 690.35C has to do with ground fault protection. Those sections were essentially combined and moved to 690.41B in the grounding section, since they relate to ground fault protection. And a lot of the words were taken out of that section because the ground fault protection standards in UL 1741 are very specific and have been molded by the National Electrical Code over the last 20 years, quite frankly, and so there's a lot of detail in there that is no longer necessary. 690.7, maximum system voltage, has been reorganized, and there's a calculation been added for larger PV systems. We'll talk about that as time permits. Circuit sizing also revised to cover DC to DC converter circuits, and there's an additional calculation allowed for calculating PV currents in DC PV circuits. This is a really, really important one and has a pretty major impact on conductor sizing, and allows the use of simulations to simulate 3-hour maximum circuit currents, which are far more realistic based upon the location and the application and the orientation of the system. All right, overcurrent protection is covered in 690.9, and it's revised to cover all PV systems. So 690.35 on ungrounded systems has been removed, and all requirements related to overcurrent protection are now back in 690.9 instead of spread over 2 different locations. And it requires 1 overcurrent device per circuit, and that overcurrent device on the DC side must be in either the positive or the negative conductor where overcurrent protection devices are required. As most of you know, with two inputs into an inverter, if there's only two circuits, two PV circuits going into a particular input on an inverter, then overcurrent protection generally is not required if the inverter does not backbeat current. Standalone systems have been moved to Article 710. As I said, arc fault detection has been revised to exempt PV output circuits on ground-mounted systems from arc fault protection when using specific wiring methods. And those specific wiring methods are direct buried or in metal raceways or enclosures, and it's only allowed on systems that are off buildings, ground-mounted systems, and it's only allowed on PV output circuits. PV source circuits are still required to have arc fault protection in all cases, regardless of whether they're on a building or ground-mounted. 690.12. Nothing really happened there, so we'll go on to 690.13. Yeah, dramatically increased in detail and included requirements for rapid shutdown within the array and detailed marking requirements in 690.56c. And we will touch on those as well, but that's really a half-day seminar. 690.13, PV system disconnecting means we already went over the details of that, and did a lot more clarification about PV system disconnects and about equipment disconnects. And they're two very different things, and the problem we find a lot in the field with AHJs and installers is that if a PV system has 6 or less disconnects throughout the system, there's no problem. But as soon as the PV system, for some reason, has 7 to 1,000 disconnects, we've got a real problem on our hands because somehow we've got it stuck in our head that we have a 6 disconnect rule. And so 690.13 makes it very clear that when we're talking about the 6 disconnect rule, the AC output of a PV interactive inverter is a single disconnect for the entire system. And so pay no attention to the other 1,000 disconnects that may be in that system. There's only one disconnect for that PV system. That is the PV system disconnect, and you can have up to 6 of them together must be grouped for a single PV system. You can have as many equipment disconnects as you want or need for the purpose of protecting yourself and allowing conductors to be de-energized for the purpose of maintenance. And there should never be any restriction on the number of disconnects you put into a PV system or a PV array, because that's all about safety. And then there's a complete new definition in 690.15 about disconnection of equipment. It adds the concept of isolating devices, which includes plug connectors and the like that are not load break rated devices, and it specifies where load break devices are necessary, and that's particularly for circuits over 30 amps where they could be connected to transistor bridges that could be shorted. And so in those cases, our equipment disconnects are required to be load break rated, but in all other cases they're not required to be load break rated, and they just need to be able to provide isolation for the purpose of working on equipment safely. Okay, next slide, we're talking about 690.31 wiring methods. It's been reorganized to include ungrounded systems into a single set of requirements. Incidentally, 690.35, for those of you who care, says that it applies to PV systems that are operated in an ungrounded state. And as we'll get into the functional definition of functional grounding, the vast majority, if not all, non-isolated PV systems that are sold in the United States of America are not ungrounded systems because they are connected to grounded AC services. And most non-isolated inverters today are required to be connected to a grounded AC service. They will not allow you to connect it to a Delta service. Now, some might be able to be allowed to be connected to a Delta service, but the vast majority of them on the market today state right in their installation instructions you cannot install this on a service, a floating service. Okay, so That's another fun one. In identification, we're getting rid of white wire. White wire is only used in solidly grounded systems, and most people don't ever install solidly grounded systems. Solidly grounded systems are where one conductor is connected directly to earth, and that's done, it's only allowed for 1 and 2 string systems that are separated from buildings, typically done for water pumping systems and the like, and nobody on this call probably has much relationship to those systems. Single conductor cable, USE2 and PV wire are permitted for all types of PV systems, including grounded and ungrounded PV systems. And so that is a change, and that really came through a lot of deliberation with the international community about properly classifying electrical systems. And since we ground our frames, we're really class 1 systems according to the world, and therefore we do not require double insulated conductors. So that's why USE2 is allowed, and that's a really important one for retrofit of inverters. So as it stands today, we can get into that later, but with retrofit of inverters, you can take a non-isolated inverter with its DC disconnect and install it on a legacy system that's 10 years old, and you will actually be fully compliant with the 2017 National Electrical Code. Very interesting and good. And it's 3,000 times more sensitive on the ground fault detection system than a typical 1 amp fuse residential inverter. Multi-conductor cable has to be listed for the application. Okay, so in 2017 code, TCER, which was specifically talked about in the 2014 code as allowed in certain applications, it's gotten a little more restrictive and said if you're using a product like TCER, you're going to have to list it for your application. Flexible cable for trackers, there's a new table for what number of strands are required for connecting to a mobile portion of a tracker. And so that's some really good information to prevent from work hardening of conductors. 690.41.42, the concept of functional grounded systems is introduced. Most PV systems installed now and in the last 15 years are functionally grounded. All PV systems require ground fault protection unless they're solidly grounded. Again, I said those are very rare systems these days. 690, except for very small systems. 690.43, equipment grounding was simplified and reorganized. It was the only section of 690, I think, that got 0 comments in the second draft phase, which was pretty amazing. And we took a pretty big hack at it. Grounding electrode systems, 690.47, completely reorganized and simplified. Basically says structures supporting PV systems must have a grounding electrode system. So if you're putting it on a building that's already got an electrode system, you connect your equipment grounding conductor to that electrode system as you would any electrical system. If you're putting in the structure, ground mount structure, whatever, then that structure needs to have a grounding electrode system added to it, and the equipment grounding conductor must be connected to the structure on which the structure grounding electrode system on which it is sitting. And then the additional array electrodes, which found way back into the 2014 code, has been turned from a requirement to a permissive, making it optional, and we can talk about that more in detail. 47D is so poorly worded in the 2014 code and before that you can actually use the exceptions to not do it for anything. 690.53 has to do with marking, and that was simplified to only have 2 items for maximum rated max power point current and rated max power point voltage were removed from the sign, and so now you're only going to be talking about the maximum system voltage and the maximum circuit current, which are the most relevant items from a system rating and equipment rating point of view. Connection to other sources has been replaced with a reference to Article 705, and storage batteries have been moved to 706, and the only thing left in 690 is requirements for self-regulated PV charge control. And if you don't know what that is, then you don't do it. So the last item was Part 9, dealing with 1,000 volts, and 10, which dealt with EV charging. and those were removed because they're covered adequately in other sections related to higher voltage systems, Article 490 and 625, I believe, which is EV charging. Article 705 had several changes. It will probably see several more changes over the next code cycle. There's a new microgrid definition with a new Part 4 about microgrids. These are AC microgrids. Point of connection has been simplified, got rid of B and C from that, and now it's just A and what used to be D for supply side and load side interconnections to electric power sources. It includes more than inverters in the load side equipment. It let's see, allows for interconnection of more than inverters on the load side, as I said. And then the next item, which is certainly of great interest to folks in California and the western United States, it allows center-fed panels in dwellings to apply the 120% rule with the PV power source connection at either end of a panel board, but not both ends. So you can, if you had a 200 amp center-fed panel, none of them are actually fed exactly in the center. They're usually a little bit off-center, but we call them center-fed panels. And you can have a 200 amp panel with center-fed and put a 40 amp PV breaker in it at either end, and it is compliant with the 2017 code, and the 120% rule applies. Let's see. The requirement for AC arc fault detection that used to be 705.12d6 has been removed. A TIA has been filed, and it is in the comment stage right now with CMP4 to remove the requirement for AC arc fault detection on cabling systems on the AC side of utility interactive inverters. And let's see, there's a new interactive system disconnecting means section that goes along with the diagrams we talked about at the beginning. And so I'm just going to cover a couple more slides and then we'll go to our questions. Functional grounded systems, here's the definition. A PV system that has an electrical reference to ground that is not solidly grounded. Solidly grounded means connection to earth without any impedance device or the like. And in fact, a fuse is an impedance device. That's inherently how it works. Informational note is a functional grounded PV system is often connected to ground through a fuse, circuit breaker, resistance device, non-isolated AC circuit. That's what we're doing right now in our PV systems. Whoops, sorry about that. Non-isolated AC circuit. So underline that. That's the vast majority of single-phase and small three-phase inverters are non-isolated grounded AC circuits. Or electronic means that it's part of a listed ground fault protection system. Conductors in these systems that are normally at ground potential, might be through a resistive ground, may have voltage to ground during fault conditions. That's an informational note. So that's functional grounded systems. So if you recognize that, all fuse grounded systems and all non-isolated systems that are connected to grounded AC systems are functionally grounded. All right, so that would include all inverters that are grid connected back to about 1998. Design changes to functional grounded PV system definitions. So the requirements for DC side of PV systems have been unified. Functionally grounded or ungrounded systems have the same requirements. By the way, just so you understand, ungrounded PV system is a very specific kind of system. It has to have an isolation transformer on the AC side to isolate it from the utility AC circuits that are grounded. It has to isolate them. And then it floats the PV array and uses an isolation monitor on the PV array while it's running to determine whether there are ground faults. There are very few of those systems in the United States of America except in very large PV power plants. There are none that I know of in residential, none in commercial systems. None of those are ungrounded systems. Only one overcurrent device required per circuit. Previously allowed only on grounded systems in 690.9c. Disconnecting means in both DC legs, so both positive and negative, to disconnect equipment. Or a DC PV system must also interrupt both legs, positive and negative. This is for safety purposes. A ground faulted old school system that has a ground fault in the positive conductor on a negative grounded system pushes the negative conductor to -500 volts. And a bolted connection that requires the worker to expose themselves to a very large hazard of operating on a hazardous voltage on bolted connections. That has gone away and required a disconnect so that they can work on it safely. Single conductor cable and PV array can use either USB2 or PV wire. Previously, PV wire required on modules and home runs for ungrounded systems. 69031C1. And then lastly, ground fault detection details covered by the listed equipment, and much of that detail was removed from the NEC. This is one of the last slides here, options for voltage and current calculations. I mentioned in the summary that we had new options. I want to cover them now. For systems over 100 kilowatts and that are designed by a licensed professional electrical engineer, allows the simulation to be performed to calculate maximum PV source and output circuit voltage, and also allows the simulation to be performed to calculate maximum source and output circuit current. Calculated current is not permitted to be less than 70% of the standard old school calculation, which was 125% of the rated short circuit current. However, both of these items, particularly the current item, will have a major positive impact on the sizing of conductors for PV systems and allow conductor sizes to be smaller and more closely aligned with the actual currents that are flowing through them, rather than the old school way, which was fine when PV modules were super expensive. The conductor cost was really almost insignificant. It has become very significant, and larger projects needs to be calculated accurately. Okay, so that's kind of the 2017 stuff. The next several slides are talking about rapid shutdown. There's an article that was written for IAEI magazine. Some of you may have read it. Also a similar article in Solar Pro magazine, and it goes into the details of all this, and I really can't go into the details now, but it talks about how you shut down conductors coming off of a string array, a microinverter system, as this is showing here, and then gets into DC to DC converters as well. This is showing contactors in a string inverter system. This is DC to DC converters, and would be similar to a solar edge system where the array is reduced in voltage to a single module voltage, but there are shut off at the inverter. In this case, it's a DC switch that shuts that off. And then battery systems, of course, very complicated in 2014 code because, again, the PV system includes all that equipment. One of the reasons we got these things separated is because it was important to separate them for various reasons, including rapid shutdown. But for the 2014, a battery system that's installed under the 2014 code is going to have to follow those rules, and it can be done. There's a lot of good ways, fairly inexpensive ways to do that. Key is to not, set up your system so you don't have to have an automatic switch on your battery, which can be a very expensive switch, and you can do that by keeping your battery circuit less than 5 feet. String inverters on rooftops are very common, complying with 690.12, where putting the string inverter within 10 feet of the array conductors. And then, of course, you could use microinverters, as you see here. The last item, which is probably the one that gets misinterpreted most often, is number 5. Equipment that performs rapid shutdown shall be listed and identified. The term identified in the National Electrical Code means that it is listed for the environment and where it's being used. It's got the proper ratings for the environment, and so we can use currently listed UL 1741 disconnect contactor combiners and the like. to provide our disconnect in rapid shutdown systems. They are not required to be rapid shutdown certified. There is a standard that is under development that is in the comment stage right now for certifying rapid shutdown equipment. That is required for the 2017 code. Yesterday I was talking to the folks in Boston, and that's going to be the thing that's going to affect them most, because January 1 they adopt the 2017 code, and all equipment they're going to have they use for shutting down conductors outside of a PV array will have to be rapid shutdown certified in the state of Massachusetts. In the state of California, that requirement will not become an issue until the 2017 code is adopted. All right, I think that's enough for now. I'm going to turn it back over to Paula and open it up for questions, and we might hit some other slides if we have time.
Bill, could you go back a slide, please? On that, I agree with you that this is John Packer, UL. I agree with you that there is not a standard, a published standard per se on that, even though there is we have a certification requirement thing for it. But just to be clear, there are two manufacturers at least that have listings, certifications right now that I know of, and there may be others for those. It's not that it's not that those rapid shutdown equipment and systems that are listed right now couldn't be used to demonstrate compliance with either the 14 or the 17. But I agree with you that the 14 doesn't very specifically require that to be done. There are other options.
That's right. Yeah, that's a good clarification. The fact is that there are several products, more than two, that have been certified for rapid shutdown to the CRD that's on the street right now. It's an outline of investigation, and several certifiers are actually using that and certifying equipment. Not unlike what was done when UL 2703 was in as an outline of investigation. And so those products are on the market today and could be absolutely used to comply with the 2017 code. There's no doubt about that. And they obviously could be used to comply with the 2014 code. There's no doubt about that either. There's nothing prohibiting somebody using a rapid shutdown certified piece of equipment to meet the 2014 code requirements. That's not the case at all. In fact, you would be encouraged to use those products because if you needed them for a particular application, because you would have a better understanding of maybe their application and use. We just want to make it clear that there have been several states, including New Jersey of late, New Mexico, Colorado, and Washington State, that have issued 90.4 exemptions for 690.12 because they misunderstood the term identified. And so basically they were claiming that until listed equipment was available that they couldn't enforce 690.12, and that was a fundamental misunderstanding. In fact, if they had read the documentation from when 690.12 was originally adopted in 2014, they would have seen that the words related to listed and identified for rapid shutdown, for rapid shutdown, were struck purposefully so that existing listed products could be used that are designed for the application in hot environments and things like that, which are contactor combiners and the like, and inverters. Rooftop inverters are certainly designed for that application.
So basically they kind of forgot to look in Chapter 2 to see the definition of words?
Yeah, well, Article 100, and the term identified means recognizable as suitable for the specific...
I said, you're right, Article 100. I was saying ICC style. Exactly.
Yep.
In Article 100, they didn't go to Article 100 for the definitions then.
Yep, and you got whole states doing that, so that's unfortunate. But that's what education's about, and in the process of time, it'll all become academic because as the 2017 code is adopted, everything will be rapid shutdown certified. And quite frankly, because of the new standard, it's going to become very difficult to even find equipment that's not rapid shutdown certified because the markets are demanding
Yeah.
Sorry, there was just a Jason Bobrook from Solar Edge mentioned that certifying to the CRD is not mandatory for NEC 2014. This needs to be made clear to inspectors and AHJ.
And that's what I think that the entire discussion that Bill and I were having here is that totally agree that it is not mandatory at this time. What the point was is that when people can also go flipping the other way and say, oh, well, you can't use this. What I was trying to make the point was that it is a way of demonstrating compliance with the requirements that are in the code.
Right. And it clearly is listed and identified, so it's clearly compliant with the 2014 code.
I didn't say it was the only way, I said it was a way.
Yeah. It's interesting for Solar Edge is that Solar Edge is a pretty large percentage of the Massachusetts market, and so they were a sponsor of the talk that I gave yesterday to 70 contractors in Boston, and in that particular venue, and talking about Solar Edge, they are going to have to get their products certified for rapid shutdown, which they've already done partially already. But to meet the requirements of the 2017 code that requires a disconnecting means on the exterior of a dwelling, of a 1- and 2-family dwelling, the rapid shutdown initiator has to be on the exterior. And so that's a specific item in the 2017 code. It is not the way things are generally done in Massachusetts because many of the electrical services are actually in the basements, and so that will require them, or it will strongly encourage them, let's just put it that way, it'll strongly encourage products like Solar Edge to have an AC shutdown process so that an AC switch on the exterior of the building can be used to shut down their system, particularly if it doesn't have battery backup and things of the like.
Bill, Pete Jackson, happy birthday, by the way.
Oh, thanks.
Happy birthday, Bill.
Just a comment, and I think the improvement to the 2017 NEC bring out an important high-level point to me, and one that's on my bucket list, and that's to see California move to the most recent edition of the National Electrical Code. It would solve a lot of the problems we deal with here in California and provide a benefit to both the industry and the public. And I think that this code cycle especially points out that benefit.
That's always been on your bucket list.
Yeah.
What do you mean that it just puts it on your bucket?
Yeah, and it's a really good point, Pete. And you know, one of the I guess arguments about the 2014 code 69.12 is that it's only 133 words and there's a lot of concepts in there. And so it was intentionally left rather obtuse to allow people to use common sense, but we know that common sense isn't very common. And so the 2017 code does go into dramatically more detail about what things mean and things like the initiator and what can be initiator and all that kind of stuff, and obviously a lot more about marking and labeling and things like that. So in enforcing the 2014 code, it would be very helpful to have the 2017 code open to help us understand what in the world the 2014 code was actually intending in the first place.
Right, and then I think Jason Bobrook from Solar Edge is unmuted and he wants to say a couple of things. Sure. Okay, Jason?
Oh, thank you. I think you guys actually closed it during the rapid shutdown conversation, but thank you for the perspectives on that, both Bill and the gentleman from UL. We get a lot of feedback from the market, and the feedback is very regional. So some people understand the intent of the code very clearly, and then other folks commonly do misinterpret that point. Bill, to your comment about that being one of the most misinterpreted clauses, and so we've seen kind of a breadth of interpretation of what rapid shutdown means. And so I'm glad that we're having these conversations for the group here.
And you know, it's like when you're writing code language, there was a very long discussion about this issue of certified for rapid shutdown, and there was a very real concern that products, there would not be a standard ready anytime soon, and here we are almost 3 years later, and it's just in the comment stage. So those were valid concerns, and we wanted to get the concept moving forward and people doing the right thing, and I think we are doing that. And I think you know, where the 2014 code is being enforced, there's plenty of hiccups and you know, horror stories of people putting disconnects up on the side of a building and crazy stuff like that. But you know, I think the vast majority of the experience has been reasonably good, and there's just, you know, trying to figure out what the language is, which is why Jim Rogers and I wrote that article for IAI Magazine and Solar Pro, is to get the word out there about the intention of what those 133 words were meant by the code making panel.
We have two more questions online, and we move on.
Yeah.
Yes, this question is from Benjamin Servin. With rail-less systems coming out, how are the cities and AHJs going to respond to the grounding that are installed on these systems?
I don't know if Bill can answer that question.
If it's got exposed metal that's likely to become energized, it's got to be grounded. So there's an important misconception here. When we use the term ungrounded PV system, I don't like the term to start with because it's a very specific type of system, as I said, that probably very few, if anybody on this call has ever seen. And because they're isolation transformers and floating arrays, and they're very uncommon here in the United States. So the term leads a lot of folks to believe that when you start talking about a non-isolated inverter and then classify it as ungrounded, which is not truly correct, that somehow you don't have to ground the frames of the system, and that is absolutely wrong. So the code is very specific that we don't have a process by which we can allow exposed metal to be grounded if it's likely to become energized. Now, the term likely to become energized is an important theme, and so double insulation is one way of preventing metal from being likely to be energized. However, going through a double insulation process in a PV system in the United States, I don't believe is going to happen in the near term. And so if you have a railless system and it's using metal that's exposed, that people have access to and can touch, that exposed metal is generally going to have to be connected, bonded together somehow in the system and connected to the grounding, equipment grounding conductor, whether the system is, whether you believe it's ungrounded or ungrounded or grounded system.
Last question, again from Benjamin Servin. For microinverter systems installed on rooftops, is it required to have an AC disconnect installed on the roof?
Wow, let's go for the controversial ones all of a sudden.
Yeah. So that's a really good question, and depending on your read of the NEC, the basic read is that a disconnect on the roof, AC disconnects on the roof are required for the individual inverters within site or in the inverter, 690.15a. So inverters in not readily accessible locations. There is not a separate disconnecting means requirement on the roof. There is a separate disconnecting means requirement in a readily accessible location. So where that circuit terminates, typically in a sub-panel or main service panel, that service panel must be in a readily accessible location, and that disconnect, it would comply with the additional disconnect that's required by 690.15a. There have been jurisdictions that have required rooftop disconnects. It's their jurisdictional right to do so, but it is not a specific requirement of the NEC. There has been an official interpretation asked for. I believe Mark Baldessari could fill in the crowd there a little bit more in detail on that one, and I believe their verdict is the same as what I just said.
Yeah, this is Mark. If you want to get in touch with me, please do. I'm at Enphase Energy, and that's true. I have contacted NFPA for a formal interpretation on this matter. And like Bill says, they recognize the fact that the connectors, if they meet 690.33, are the disconnecting means at the inverter, and the circuit breaker at ground level fulfills the requirements for a readily accessible disconnect in addition to the ones by the inverter. So I have plenty of material on that and be happy to send you some information.
Hey, can you guys hear me now? This is Don Hughes. I was going to try to ask a quick question. Couple, actually.
How's the beach, Don? How's the beach?
And quick?
Yeah, the beach is wonderful. It's like 85 degrees out here. It's absolutely beautiful. Hey, Bill, you had said that obviously to mitigate the requirements of the grounding in some cases, like a pool pump with the double insulation, you can do that with the conductors. What do you think about the current requirements to bond metal roofs? I understand that that's an interpretation, that the metal roof itself is likely to become energized. And do you think that double insulation would mitigate that issue? And I have a couple other questions too. Let me know if you want to rapid fire or you want to do them one at a time.
Well, let's start one at a time because my brain is pretty mono.
Yeah, I saw that picture that you posted on the web. When you first started messing with your web camera, it kind of looked like a Bigfoot sighting. And I didn't know that the carbon dating. Listen, I didn't know the carbon dating results came back in yet. So hey, happy birthday, man! I'm sorry I didn't say that earlier. I didn't know the carbon dating results were back in.
Not everybody can be as good looking as you, Don. Come on, man. I'm sorry.
Okay, just because I'm beautiful.
All right.
You're beautiful. I know. Anyway, so I think we were talking about metal roofs. I can't remember, but yeah, there's obviously no specific requirement in the code for grounding metal roofs. That would be an interpretation of exposed metal that is likely to become energized, and certainly certain cable management systems can help prevent or maybe obviate that from happening in the first place. The real problem with grounding metal roofs is that in most cases, with the exception of making connections underneath a ridge cap, you would violate the warranty of a metal roof to provide any bonding whatsoever to it. And metal roofs are normally made up of multiple pans, and so even if you bonded the pans at the ridge cap, underneath the ridge cap, in a way that would not damage the warranty of the product, it is not going to necessarily carry through to the other pans on the roof. So it's a nice idea, but it's a really, really tough one to work out in the real world. Now, the fact is that a lot of metal roofs go on metal structures, and in that whole process they're in such good contact with the metal structure at so many locations that you would have very low impedance to that metal structure that's grounded and bonded already. And so for metal structures, I don't think it's an issue at all. It's really more of an issue for wooden structures, and in most cases, wooden houses and things like that, the metal roofs tend to be smaller single pan systems, but you can't say that in all cases because there's some very expensive homes that have very large metal roofs, and bonding those are essentially impossible.
Yeah, it's kind of a nightmare question. Okay, another thing, are they amending Chapter 3 at all? I mean, we're doing a lot of amendments to 690, but there's nowhere anywhere in Chapter 3 where they talk about PV conductors, and I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that we could amend to Chapter 3 and actually move support of USE2 conductors in a PV situation back in 1938 where USE2 cable is, and get it out of NN cable and stuff like that. Are we looking at Chapter 3 amendments as well as 690 and 75?
No, so the requirements for PV wire are all in 690. And so it talks about the support requirements. The 2017 code gets into the support requirements, 690.31c1, and says PV wire shall be installed in accordance with 338.10b4b and 334.30. So it makes a reference back to Chapter 3.
Yeah, one quick comment in Chapter 3, what is it, 310.15 about the conductors on a rooftop. There was that table in there that added a temperature adjustment factor for installing conductors exposed to sunlight on a rooftop. That table in 2017 has been reduced to just one temperature adder, and I believe it's like for 1/2 inch and under.
7/8 inch. 7/8 of an inch. 7/8 of an inch or less. If the conduit's within 7/8 of an inch of the roof, then you add the 33 degrees C adder. In all other cases, you do not add an adder. So basically, the rule is if you stay more than an inch above the roof, there is no adder required in the 2017 code for conduit on rooftops.
Hey, Bill, last question. Is there any thought of putting out a TIA to address a couple of the things that we know are coming regarding 705.12 and the 17, and maybe some Chapter 2 stuff, amendments to address load management systems for sustainable energy purposes? Or are we looking at any TIAs at all for 690? You know, for 705.12 for the center head service kind of guidance for 2014?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I think there's been talk about possibly doing a TIA on center-fed panels, and that would be a pretty easy one to do because the requirement in 2017 code is that it only relates to dwellings, center-fed panels on dwellings, so it's pretty restrictive, but it is the primary issue. And certainly in California, Arizona, and other places where these things are common. So the answer is there have not been any official plans for TIA. I've got 3 TIAs already in. 1 has already been approved. 2 more are in process. And 1 has to do with the fact that the reference or the exception for connectors being disconnects, where it was located in 690.17 in the 2014 code, was after interruption of circuit, and some people have said, well, that only applies to interruption of circuit or interrupting rating, which didn't make any sense, by the way. So we changed it to make sure it was relevant to the whole 690.17 that a connector could be used as a disconnect. And then the other 2 TIAs are, one is changing the rapid shutdown time from 10 seconds to 30 seconds to be consistent with the 2017 code as products are being developed and rolling out. And then the other one is the removal of the AC arc fault detection requirement in 705.12d6.
Cool. Thanks. Keep up the good work. We're looking at updating the State of California PV guidebook. There's most of the people sitting in the room that are on the board for that, you know, Tacker and Pete and Alan Fields and Pat, a bunch of us. So we're looking at maybe providing some guidance and amendments, TIAs to that document, and we might look to you to try to help us with the maybe some recommendations on that issue, the center fed issue, and a couple other coming up issues if you want to talk about that offline later.
Yes, I'm happy to talk offline. I know that the city of San Diego is considering a citywide essentially approval of what the 2017 code says. City of San Francisco is also looking at the very same thing. I know we have some jurisdictions represented there. Pat Healy, he might want to consider the same thing in his jurisdiction, and we have LA and LA County, Mustafa, that might want to consider the same thing.
One last one.
And Jackson, sorry, I didn't mean to leave out Pete and all the other good people there.
All right, yeah, we got one more.
Hector, back to you in the studio.
There's one mention about multi-conductors saying that multi-conductors can have to be for that particular use. Does that apply to Romex? Because, you know, with these AC modules, we're really interested in trying to use regular Romex wire. So does that mean, like, we can't use Romex if we're going to have to use some sort of
No.
Or how does that work? Or
No.
is Romex
What it actually says is jacketed multi-conductor assemblies listed and identified for the application shall be permitted in outdoor locations. Cable shall be secured at intervals not exceeding 6 feet. So it took out TCER specifically. So Romex inside of a building is a wiring method, and if you're applying it in a way that it is allowed, there's nothing that would have to be rated related to PV for Romex inside of a building. You would not be allowed to use it outside the building under any circumstances.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. Yep.
Well, thank you, Bill. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the information. And happy birthday. And you're welcome.
Thank you, Bill.
Some of the questions that are being raised, some of the issues may be controversial. So I think let's go down the line. Maybe some of those issues we'll come back to SEAC, and we can come back and a recommendation for folks how to proceed. So thanks again, Bill.
Alrighty. Take care. Have a great day.
And then we're going to move on to discussing our draft recommended practices for utility small residential PV. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to access our SEAC Solo Google Drive, and we're going to do the live edits during our discussion here on Google Docs so that everybody can see how easy it is.
If I say something, we have promised in the past not to do wordsmithing live here, but since we changed to Google Drive, there's been a lot of questions how to use it, and so the whole purpose of this is to get everybody comfortable using Google Drive. And just for you folks here, the structure of our document is for recommended practices. We have an objective and an issue statement. Sometimes it's the most challenging things to get right. You know, what is the problem that we're trying to solve here, and get that right so that everybody's there to understand. And then actually going into the background, some of the history, and then some actual recommendations folks to implement. And again, they're just recommendations. They're you can apply them or not apply, but hopefully what comes out is so compelling that, hey, this makes sense, and we'll implement it.
Okay, sure. All right, so on our screen right now, we have issue number 1, which we've defined as practices to improve the meter spot process for small residential rooftop solar energy systems. Jim, if you want to jump in and mention your comment on a couple of things, you're very welcome to.
Yeah, this is the meter spot one?
Yes.
Okay. So the last time, if you guys remember, we had one recommended practice that we were trying to structure, and really it was just a big long shopping list of things that dealt with utility. So this last pass we split it into 5 different topics essentially, and tried to separate these topics out. Go ahead.
So I'm kind of puzzled with the terminology. What the heck is a meter spot? I've never heard that term.
Service order from the utility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why can't we call it what normal people would think of it being?
Yeah. It's used by DWP and a bunch of other Edison and stuff like that.
They use that term, meter spot?
Yep.
You make me feel a lot better. I agree with you. I had to actually do some research, and I found the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, at least if you're going to use a term, if you're going to use a slang term, because that's what I'm hearing. This is a slang term. I always have a heartburn when we have slang terms that are not defined.
That is what it is. The slang term is normally called meter location.
Yeah. So can we call it meter location rather than meter spot? Or if you want to use the term meter spot, let's define it.
Everybody in Southern Cal seems to know what it means, unfortunately.
But that's
Apparently, yeah, but I don't know.
the largest utility in the state, Pacific Gas and Electric, I don't believe uses that term.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
if we're just being statewide, it represents.
the
term used in this area for even before I got here. So.
It was interesting doing the search on Google when I first started hearing that. I was struggling to locate. I figured it out.
Yeah, it's a term just like Romex. Instead of non-metallic sheath cable. It's a term that
I think it's an industry
contractors
term.
been using for a long time. It's a slang term.
I think the utility guys use it. I think it's like a meter spot. And the electrician doesn't build the meter spotter.
So actually,
I think that's actually a job, a meter spotter.
So when there are two utility people sitting next to me that are saying, I don't use that term, I use the term meter location, I think we ought to be using the term that if you called in and you called into the utility and they say, hey, I want to do a meter spot, they go, what are you talking about? Let's use terms that people are going to...
Okay, for our purposes, I think it doesn't work. I'm sorry, for our purposes, I think it needs to be clarified.
Yeah. So if you want to define it, go for it.
So it sounds like a definition for meter spot will be good.
Or if you want, you could say meter location, then in parentheses say also referred to as meter spot. I'd be going.
Agreed.
I would not have said a thing, but of course you know me, I had to.
So you for those of you that are slightly Google challenged, is that easy? Okay, so it's very easy to capture who the author is.
Yes.
Right, so everybody should know was a change is made, who made the change.
I don't know if I like that part.
Yeah. We'll know when John around the doctor.
And can we also, for further clarification, can we say to facilitate utility metered location? Because the fact is that I get questions all the time from people that are using production meters just for their own purposes of finding out how much power is being produced. And I think that would be, even though I know at the very beginning it says utility interconnection standard process, it's best to remove any doubt.
And if you see the commands on top of they're not exactly the same as Word, fairly close, some of the same symbols. So just so you see, it's user friendly.
Yeah, and another thing just to mention that what I have researched is it's better to do all your collaboration in Google Docs than download it, convert it to Word, and then bring it back in here because there's some conversions that don't work.
Yeah. So
it actually creates more work for us.
Yeah.
And just one general, this is overarching term, thought, just having read through this and all, is I think that there are times when we use a lot of terminology in our industry that sometimes we use terminology that's designed to keep certain people out. I think more than anything else, because I think it would be best to help in understanding if SEAC might consider identifying maybe a glossary of what terms we might use, or just. And I don't want to redefine things, but I want to be able to point and say, hey, if we're using terms that you don't understand, go look at Article 100 of the National Electrical Code. Go look at Chapter 2 of the Building Code. Go look at and guide people so that they don't just go running off to the Webster's Dictionary, that they go running off to the definitions that we should be using.
So a good point. What I've seen and heard with the discussion we've had in the past, folks here are pretty sophisticated, and
we know what we're talking about, but does anybody else?
Right. So outside of this room, you have a lot of different levels of sophistication, and when the public sees it, they may not get the whole picture. So that's a good point. So maybe that's a new item.
Sorry, Paula.
It's okay.
No problem.
Okay. So go on.
All right. So we've now got the objective to facilitate utility meter location, otherwise referred to as meter spots for small residential rooftop solar energy systems up to 10 kW in a timely manner while ensuring the safety and reliability of the electric grid.
Okay, so the objective makes sense. It's clear. Okay, good. So let's move on.
All right, issue statement, the deployment and utilization of small residential rooftop solar energy systems, often introduced the requirement for a meter spot by the utility. Due to the volume of meter spots required, the PV industry is experiencing significant delays from some utilities simply due to the meter spot process.
Do you want to go back and the meter spot?
Yeah, looking at DWPs, there's, for what we would call meter spot in their manual, it says meter location or location. So I'm with John on removing it as, you know, pretty much as an industry term. So just, I'd just make it meter locations, utility meter location or something.
Yeah, I think we just have to, it's fine to remove it if you use meter locations throughout the document, but I think we just have to, the text that define it, also known as meter spot.
Yeah.
Well, I think we do in the objective.
Yeah, that's fine.
And so when you use the meter location throughout, peppered throughout, I think that, you know, somebody says, oh, what's meter location? You say, oh, well, you know, look up the front. One other thought, too, is that meter spot may, you know, if it is specifically for this document, you could also have just the definition of the term or explain about the term at the end of the document if you wanted to. You could just say meter spots is a term that is used by some in the industry to for these particular issues and such. And that, if it's a term that's very specific to this document, that's another thought.
If you have meter spot, it's going to refer you to meter location. I think we should put meter location and then just right next to it in parentheses, put meter spot, and then eventually simple it out. You know.
Yeah.
Well, you could always put AKA.
Well, like I said, meter locations kind of gives you a nice generic term. You need to know where that meter is going to be located.
I have a question online.
Okay, sorry about that.
I have a quick question online here. It says the deployment and utilization of small residential systems often include the requirement for a meter spot of the utility. Are we? It seems like that's missing something, and that's obviously triggered by something. So it sounds like the installation of small residential solar system often includes a electrical service upgrade, which include or may require a relocation of the existing electrical service. This just sounds so like we're missing something here. And maybe we could provide a little more guidance on the things that trigger the meter relocation or service upgrade, and then define it as due to the volume of service requests, the inspection for the meter location, yada yada. Just my 2 cents.
Don, when we go to issue number 2, I think that's covered. So hang on there. Okay, Prasad?
Reference to the term residential, does this imply, what, 20-unit residential unit, or we talk about single-family dwelling?
Good question. That needs to be defined, yeah. So,
right. In order to stay with that, did we get to be a single-family dwelling?
Did we get away from maybe 2188 related issues in this series? Or?
Well, the focus was to be residential. We didn't talk about small residential. Jim, what's your understanding? KTW less, is that what we're talking about?
No, we were.
Or single family?
My understanding was we weren't dealing with AB 2188 anymore. Yeah, this is just generic.
So single family?
No. Well, what difference does it make? That's what I'm curious.
Does it make a difference?
Yeah, it does make a difference because in a multi-family dwelling, we can have multi-metering systems, whereas the single family usually don't. Now you're talking about meter spots. Which one are you talking about? All those meters? Single meters? What are we talking about?
That's kind of what I'm getting at. When does a residential PV system require a meter spot? The meters are already there. They may require upgrades, but usually it's in the same location where it's existing.
Yeah. Well, DWP has certain rules that if I do a service upgrade, they may relocate the service to another location. They may change from overhead to underground, too. They have areas that are mandated to go underground once they change from overhead.
We're not seeing that down on that.
Yeah, we do. So leave it up to them to figure out what they want to do.
Yeah, well, in a lot of cases, the meters are located on the back of the property, and they want to move them up to the side or the front.
We have some meters still in basements that they want. The old meters, when they do the service upgrades, they got to be brought up to a certain area. Some areas they got to remove the old lead cable and put in new underground.
Based on what Pat says, a lot of times if you touch, for us, if you touch the panel, even if you change it out for the light, anytime you touch it, it goes to current standards, which means is the meter location today acceptable? It could be that now there's something else in front of the panel, and if you touch it, you have to relocate it somewhere else. It could be the bottom of the ground's not big enough, you got a trench.
Yeah, yeah.
We just don't run into it.
Yeah, we run in certain areas, and then we have certain areas mandated to go from overhead to underground too. That's why we let the utilities deal with that.
As I understood the context of this issue, and forgive me, Jim, I'm going to bring you guys up. I think it came from Jim's side, and it's just the process, which could be difficult from your perspective at times, just to get that meter set. It may be because of an upgrade, it may be because it's a new service, it may be because it's relocated, but it's specifically just that process of saying, hey, we need a new meter, who can pull out the old one, those types of issues, correct? Yeah, so I think we're trying to focus on that.
Yeah, it's just because, there is another utility agent like Texas that deals with MPUs. So I tried to separate the two here, because meter spots is literally, in some cases, 3 to 4 weeks of our process.
So, Jim, you have on the background here, so we're talking about a generic situation, not necessarily when that situation comes up, whatever that is. But maybe you can talk a little more on the background.
Yeah, I mean, I can read what I have here, but basically, there's an inordinate proportion of the delays that we're accounting for our customers right now are due to the meter spot process. So the utility often requires the existing meter at the home be inspected in person to determine whether or not utility customer upgrades are required. Some of these upgrades that are discovered are being required during the meter spot process are the following. And as you guys have already mentioned, meter needs to be relocated due to obstructions or interference. As SDG mentioned, with newly installed equipment or gas meters. So basically, it's not, once you start touching it, it's not grandfathered in anymore, so it has to be relocated. That's one of them. Conductors feeding the meter from the utility source need to be upgraded, either enlarged or replaced due to damage. So I know when DWP comes out, they'll actually look at the overhead service, and they'll look at the underground service, make sure it's still intact. So that's what number 2 is. Number 3 is the meter is not compatible, potentially with net metering. But, basically needs to be replaced.
Does that clarify? I know Basad had brought up the issue again. This says home, so maybe that needs to be defined, single family residential, multifamily, or does it really matter? If the issue does come up, does it matter what the situation is?
Sorry to go backwards on you guys, but are we getting away from putting in a long-form definition of what meter spots is? Spell out a comprehensive statement, and then in parentheses put meter spots to be used throughout these issue statements. I think one of the thoughts was is that we either had to have a definition at the end of the document that explains what a meter spot is, and expands on it and talks about it being an industry slang and so forth, rather than do it on the front part. You can put it in the front part, you can put it at the end, the beginning, and the end part. I don't really care. Just as long as there's have a clarity.
So are these issues?
But I don't think we're going to come up with that into words right now.
Just a PV connection period.
She had it on her list.
Because for DWP, it's every project, so that's kind of localized. Yeah.
Well, and SDG every time we SDG and SDG every time we need an MPU is meter spot, which is almost 30% of projects. Right, so I think the definition, we've gone through it, and we're one of the two action items of a separate document definition, but okay, it sounds like
for the moment, put it in there.
Okay. Yeah. Now going back to home, residential, multi-residential, with the back in you guys, does it really matter, or do we need to define a specific situation where these things happen? Or
it doesn't really matter to us, Hector.
you know, I'm okay with either one, but.
Well, I want to make sure it's consistent with the content.
The suggestions?
I was going to suggest just make it all, because that's the way terminology used in the building code, used in the family dwelling.
Family dwelling, instead of home or residential?
Right, because home can mean different things, different people.
Yeah, I agree with Bazad. Residential is extremely broad.
And it's very broad.
It could be an apartment complex. Yeah.
Exactly. It could be 200 units volume.
Exactly.
You could have board
You want to
here.
include duplexes, triplexes.
Yeah.
So,
Well, so that's why 1 and 2 family dwellings would capture that for you, and that's a code-defined term. 1 and 2 family dwellings is code-defined terms. So I would think that would be clear as well.
Dwellings?
Because that's, I think, what Jim's mainly after, is it not?
I mean, that's the bulk of what we're dealing with here.
Yeah.
Obviously, commercial does require
Or multifamily housing is going to be something that you'd be interested too, but that's it's got a little bit more complexity to it.
Sure. 1 and 2 family dwelling?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I like 1 and 2 family dwellings.
Is that Alan?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just saying I like that.
You get to the point where you can recognize people's voices.
Yeah,
I'll be able to put you in so
Or I would like
so what's the conclusion? We're going to change it to 1 and 2 family dwelling? Yeah. You guys okay? Yeah, makes sense. What about the KW side? Are you going to stick with 10 KW or just, why do you have to stick with 10 KW if you're not trying to find?
I would take that out.
I would take it out.
Right, if it's just a recommendation, there's no need for a definition of what the upper size limit should be.
I actually like the 13.44 kW that was.
Oh, no.
13.4.
Oh, Don.
Come on. All right, let's stick with the 120% rule then. Can we all agree on not stoning Don and go with the 120% rule? Please?
We're going to disconnect on. So it sounds like removing the 10 kW limit makes sense.
Yeah, because this should be more universal.
Okay, good.
I don't know what I'm talking about.
Okay, anything else on the objective mission statement and in the background?
I am confused with saying an inordinate portion can be, I don't know, some of the wording. Well, I think that it's we can be challenged on some of these things, but
We mute John too.
yeah. But you love me anyway.
There's not a right big enough.
All right, let's move down on the back. So wherever it says home or residential, it'll say 1 and 2 family dwelling. So we'll go along and make those changes.
Yeah.
So where does it capture who's making the edit? Can you actually show that?
Now.
Is it possible to show it now? So you guys can see that it does track the changes, but not just the changes, but actually when you go back to your actual drive.
I think it's on the right side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone?
Down.
When you go out to your actual drive where the documents are kept, there's a little list of what edits have happened and when they happened.
Okay, I think the key thing, Hector, is that just go ahead and do the changes and save it, and don't worry about it because it will track it.
All right.
Right? Isn't that your message?
Exactly.
Don't worry about it.
Okay, going on, background. Hold on.
Yes. Okay, so the background and inordinate portion of the delays encountered by customers who are installing PV systems can be the result of delays in the meter spot process. The utility often requires that the existing meter at the home is inspected in person to determine whether or not utility or customer upgrades are required prior to performing the PV installation.
So make sure this is accurate statement, I think. Well, from all parties, is that accurate?
Not really. We don't really want to look at it unless you want to touch it. So if you're doing a PV system and you don't need to
few other municipal utilities as well that will require a meter spot for any PV project.
So is it the utility often requires, should that be rephrased then? Or? Some. Yeah.
Some.
Okay. That's fine. Some? Okay. Some utility require?
Well, and to be fair, in my area, the reason that happens is because they need to be able to install a smart meter so we can take advantage of the produced energy. Yeah, so if the smart meter on premises, they don't come out and change it. If they need one, they come out and change it. So it's not always a bad thing. That's why some or sometimes.
But that doesn't kick in meter spot or meter location, right? They will not only change the meters, right? They will change the meter to the location is, right? Right.
John, what's the word for it?
But no.
I think, listen, I think some is good. I think some is good, but I think that we underutilize the word unfortunately.
I'm not sure that's unfortunate, because the thing is that the only reason why some utilities I can see wanting to do that is because they have probably been burned before when they did something, and then they find that they get out in the field and their crews will rant rave at the planner, right? Is that about right? Because they've been told, oh, it's like this, and they find out it's totally different. Right.
That's my understanding.
I don't think it's unfortunate. It's just a statement of fact of what some utilities do. I don't think it's unfortunate. So, or anything from whatever.
Okay, it's not really unfortunate, but when you look at it from an AHJ perspective, there's a big disconnect between the AHJ and the utility, and I think that needs to be the things that are under the purview of the AHJ should be left to the AHJ. The things that are under the purview of the utility should be left to the utility. And the utility's responsibilities really stop at the point of interconnection, which is 2 feet outside of the entrance of the service drop conductors.
They can also require a production meter for the system for a rebate.
Well, I get the meter part, but I mean, we really need to kind of look at this is an inspection issue, and inspection issues should be left to the building inspectors. And I think the utility needs to work closer with the building inspectors so that we don't require a 10-foot clearance over a walking surface in the NEC and a 12-foot clearance over the walking surface in the green books. And once we all kind of come together and start interpreting things the same, we can really facilitate sustainable energy being implemented because we're not really afraid of it. We understand what it's doing.
Okay, hang on.
It's not always working clearances, though. I mean, some of the utilities like Modesto irrigation or Turlock irrigation require, or sorry, not Turlock irrigation, Tulare. They would require you to get a meter spot for their special production meter just because they have certain requirements for where that meter must be located. And I mean, that's not something that's addressed by code. It's just something for their rebate or their incentive. So I mean, it's totally on them, and there's nothing in the code that an AHJ could actually be looking at for that location of that meter socket.
So will this discussion require any clarification? Or are we good?
No, I don't think so. It's up to each individual utility and their surrounding AHJs to work it all out. But we all need to look at it from the perspective of that we're trying to facilitate creating a sustainable world through implementing solar PV permitting and making it simple. They're not falling off the roofs and not bursting into flames. So this stuff really should be pretty easy.
Okay. So I can't resist it because it's really bothering me more I'm looking at this. In the first sentence, we're basically saying an inordinate portion of delays are caused because of the utilities process. Bottom line. That's what we're saying. So in a lot of respects, that it sounds like we're saying it's the utilities that are the ones who are messed up here. And the mess up can be not just because, maybe the utilities, maybe, but the mess up could be because somebody doesn't understand the process or they didn't plan ahead and they didn't think about, oh, you know, I just want to, I got to think about, I got to go talk to the utility as well as I got to go talk to the building department. We've been sensitive on all these other previous ones, and I just think that maybe a better way is to say many delays can occur due to either not understanding or the meter spot process, or in the execution and planning during the meter spot process. Then you're explaining what the delay is. When I read that sentence, I have no idea what's causing the delay, but I'm going to assume, hey, it's the meter spot process, so therefore it's those two over here on my right.
Couldn't agree more. I think you could start that
I'm not picking on you, you know that.
Okay. I couldn't agree with him more. I think you could start that whole sentence by saying a lack of clearly defined process, a lack of clearly defined implementation, whatever it is, but it's the processes are not being clearly defined, clearly advertised on websites. This is 2016. Let's find a way to say this is our process. This is how you implement it. This is how you apply for this. This is how you get a permit for this. But it's clearly a lack of understanding of the processes of going through the procedures of getting a permit or getting an interconnection. I think that is clearly the background here, is just a lack of understanding of what I need to do to put solar PV on my house, or what I need to do to create this situation for myself. It's just not defined.
All right, so hang on with that thought. I want to hear from Jim and other installers.
That's what I want to hear from Jim and Mike, what you think about that.
Yeah, I don't disagree that there's installers out there that don't understand the meter thought process or the meter location process. That's always going to be true. But I think the publication of those processes is really probably could be better.
Then put that down.
You know, we've had to build, our team has had to build our own flow charts of what the process is for each utility. It's different everywhere. And they're not readily available. It's not something we can call utilities. They can do that here. Especially the specific to TV, you know. So I don't mind it being, you know, toned such that it's not just utilities' fault. That wasn't my intent. It was basically, maybe that's the way it reads, but I don't even mention the utility in that first sentence. And like Mike said, you could almost just drop that first sentence and just say, you know, in many cases, utility requires it.
So I want to go back, way back. So some early discussions is that time. So if we just focus on that issue, what can be done to reduce that time? You know, is there not just understanding the processes, understanding procedures, but I just want to put that out there on the table. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I just feel like we're really focused on trying to figure out the problem here, and we keep going back and forth of, you know, who's causing the problem. But I remember from the last meeting with the presentations, I mean, there was discussions of solutions of either sending in a picture of what's there and all that kind of stuff. So there's going to be like this online, you know, review and approval without having to send somebody out to the job site and all that kind of stuff, right? So I mean, I don't know. I mean, I feel like this is pretty well captured here on what the background is and why we're having these problems. And I don't think it's really pointing the finger at anybody. It's just kind of saying this is what happens when people come out to the job site. So down there somewhere, I mean, I think maybe it's now time we should shift the discussion to some solutions to overcome these issues, right?
So, the word delay is important, and that leads to, you know, publishing processes, publishing procedures, and then actually maybe there's some solutions, some recommendations that will shorten that delay either from the AHJ, the installer, or the utility.
Yeah, just in the interest of progress with the document we're working on, keep in mind we're only looking at number 2, background. We talked about ways to fix it. That's point number 5. Okay. So we should cover the recommendations if they're not already covered under 5 when we get there. Right now we just want to, I think, get the background language so everyone's happy.
Exactly.
Yeah, this is like our 3rd meeting where we've talked about this.
Yeah, I find that when it's clear what the background is, what the situation is, then it's a lot easier to figure out great solutions to help improve what is current. And if you don't understand what that is, then you can't really come up with a great solution. And I really felt that was great last time when I got to hear Jim explaining all the issues that you guys had, and then also hear what you have to work with and what the utilities had. And I thought, as best as we can capture those two, shall we say, perspectives into this, I think that we're that much further ahead.
And then from the last meeting, I really appreciate Gilbert saying, hey, you know, you will take some of these ideas back to us, and you know, you got your own challenges and your own bureaucracy, but at least, you know, consider those.
In this case, aren't we talking about the utility interconnection issue, the standard procedures, and how to facilitate utility meter location, and kind of move to the inspection process, and maybe provide more guidance on the things that trigger meter locations? And I mean, none of this really has to do with the inspection process. We're talking about, this is the utility issue, and how do we communicate what's going to cause problems to the installers with the utility? When you exceed the size of the system, or what, you know, we're talking about inspection procedures, and I don't think this has anything to do with the actual building inspectors or the authority having jurisdiction in regards to meter location.
You're right. It has nothing to do with it. There's no interaction with HJ on meter spot. Did you hear that, Don?
Well, there's a meter release.
Okay, so the background. Well, there is a connection when you get a meter location from the utility. If you're pulling a permit, a lot of times, or I think in all cases, the AHJ is going to require you to have gotten a meter location from the utility prior to issuing the permit.
But that's for changing the service or doing a service upgrade.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
So,
but go back to what we're doing here, you guys. I mean, this is SEAC. This is a SEAC meeting. We're talking about utility interconnection standard procedure requirements. And here we are spending a lot of time talking about inspection procedures and yada, yada, yada. And we should be talking about what is SEAC going to do to make recommendations regarding utility meter location and spot metering and that for 1- and 2-family dwellings. How do we mitigate that? How do we address that as a group? Not talk about inspection procedures and what we think about other issues. Those are all great issues, but right now we need to like kind of put this under a microscope and say we're talking about utility meter location issues. I just think we're wasting time here.
Hopefully we'll get there.
Yes, we're trying. We're trying to get there, and we'll get the recommendations. Hopefully they're right on. So just get to the background for now.
Yes, the background doesn't match the objective. The background talks about existing. This is for existing situations only. This is not no new panel, no replacing of existing panel. So the ET somehow, I mean, the objective talks about existing as well. It should be somewhat of existing. So I have an existing situation, you know, in case of SEAC and the other stuff, they don't require, if I'm doing a TV in my house and I'm not touching my panel, then I have to go under the meter spot or meter location. Okay, so we need to somehow add into the objective, this is for existing, that some utilities are asking for that.
Correct?
That's a good point.
Okay. Where, because if you look at
well,
so the objective is something existing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's not you guys. That's not Edison. That's either one of you guys. But
I recommend that the existing is in the wrong modifier. It really should be for existing 1- and 2-family dwellings. It's not for existing utility meter location, because what you may be having to move in.
Because you may have existing.
Yeah, it facilitate utility meter location for existing 1- and 2-family.
Yeah, new utility meter location.
Am I correct?
Okay.
If you're going to have existing before one and two family dwellings, you have to say existing service equipment or that will service, because we're not talking about existing rooftop solar energy systems. We're talking about an existing service equipment in a single family or one or two family dwelling.
No, because you're going to move the. You may move it. It doesn't matter. We have. It's not a new construction of a building. It's to begin with. We already have an existing building that is going to have that you're going to be deciding. Can I keep the utility meter location where I am, or do I have to move it? And do I have to change it or not? That's why I'm saying is it's not really. It's not about the existing service, because I might have an upgrade, right? We're already talking about there's 3 items of upgrades under background.
This is not about existing one and two family dwelling.
Hey, but we're not going to facilitate the utility meter location in any way, shape, or form. What we're going to do is we're going to facilitate meeting the requirements of the utility meter location. We can't facilitate the location of it. We got to think about this in proper English terms. So what SEAC is trying to do is our proposed recommendation practices are to facilitate meeting the utility meter location requirements and yada yada yada. We're not gonna do nothing with the location itself.
Quick comment. As fascinating as this conversation really is for everybody, I'm wondering if this might not be better left to the groups, after today's meeting, so that we can, address items that are relevant to everybody that's here.
Yeah, we're going to do this for a few more minutes. Okay. Thanks, Judge. Just wanted to, if we can get,
what Cal factor is? The most interested parties here are the installers and the utilities, obviously, and the word stuff. They're the most engaged in this part in these 5 documents. So maybe we can just get a commitment from those parties that they will make recommendations or edits to these documents over the next week or so that we can get these cleaned up to a point where we can bring it back to the group. Because honestly, even though the AHJs are interested and want to see this part of the process go better as members of SEAC, it doesn't really affect them as much.
And as an AHJ, I would defer to the installers and the utilities to address it.
And at the end of the day, I want the major utilities that are here to kind of agree, because I don't really necessarily think any of the utilities that are part of SEAC are necessarily the biggest contributors to these delays. But I want the language and everything to be received well by other utilities. At the end of the day.
Okay, so we need your commitment, and I know that the report time is important for everybody here, and everybody's very, very busy. So going to Google Docs, you can see it looks very straightforward, and comments can be put on there. So you cannot have a lively discussion, but you could provide comments and go back and forth. Sorry, John. So everybody understands, but if the folks,
maybe we could even get a follow-up for myself and Mike to facilitate a meeting where we invite everybody to a Zoom meeting where we can make these edits in a smaller group.
Sure.
Yeah, we can do that via Google Hangouts.
Okay.
If it's not such a huge crowd.
So follow-ups, set that up?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So there's several other issue statements related to this, and if we can get them wrapped up within a week, that would be pretty amazing. And
a week.
Isn't that far off? So Paul, we'll get that together, and again, you can do this anytime, and Paula and I are available to help out. So it's 7:35. Maybe we could do now is grab lunch and take a break for about 15 minutes, and then we'll get back to work and eat lunch.
You want me to email it from the Gmail address? Would that be easy for you?
That would be advice.
I've got
Yeah, I mean, I used to write a lot of you work on the problem. I'll take care of it.
So Leonard Murphy, and I agree that it's always about the not predicated on the violating the warranty of the roof as much as not having to make changes to the way they currently do. So we take it to builders. That's the problem. The builders are it's a new roof that we work with. Yeah, so it's a new and the reality is builders have to do whatever they want to do. That Leonard Murphy the builder, that's the problem. Maybe I got you. Or they they're like, well, that's the Leonard Murphy. Sorry. You're a worker, someone else, you're like, you're what about integration using our child replacement concept for powers? So my we got the first and the last I saw, I knew we had the and then make the flat version. Agreed, that's my roof. I think it's safe to say that product will be available for many more miles to buy. But I know for you guys want to know trigger. That's something Mark Cameron will be better for. I heard and the meeting we had last time, the comment I heard was we have to be judicious about how we roll this out because we're going to have finite number of these available in a certain amount of time. Personally, I would be
Marky, Gilbert. Folks in the back are ready.
Do I have a question, Evelyn?
I already know how I'm going to start.
Yeah.
Guys online.
Hello, folks. Just remember to be nice to me. I'll be nice to you. Okay, I wouldn't throw you under the bus. I might mom with an easy question. Thank you. I won't push you directly. Then we whittle that to 11, and in those 11, 02703, the committee agreed was an important issue to tackle, and that had to do with, understanding what the standard is it's still evolving, how does it apply, who does it apply to, things of that nature, and we're still working on what those issue statements really are, kind of refine those, so we can actually come up with recommendations, and John, he's going to be helping us with that since he has plenty of spare time as well. Exactly. So I think most of you know Evelyn, but if you are the...
I'll go ahead and introduce myself. Thank you, Hector. So sorry, I think I'm getting a cold. I'm actually from Northern California, and I've been flying back and forth to Southern California, really, so I'm not sure if that has something to do with it. But as Hector mentioned, my name is Evelyn Butler. I'm the Director of Codes and Standards for the Solar Energy Industries Association. A lot of you are familiar with it, just referred to as SEAC. I've actually only been with the organization for about a month, 33 days if you want to do the math. And after actually taking prior to joining SEAC, I was with UL for 25 years. And I spent the last 10 managing and growing UL solar business from what used to be about, I want to say, 25 customers. 15 years ago, we used subcontractors to do our testing. We had 4 engineers, I think, at that time actually working on certification to actually a much bigger operation where we had laboratories worldwide. We expanded the portfolio. We did a number of different things. And that, of course, took a lot of collaborative work with industry, with all different parts of the value chain to do that. And so that's one of the reasons why when I got into discussions with SEA about how I could help them, I think they also felt like their technical, the codes and standards side needed a lot of that help and needed to be able to bring all the different stakeholders together to advance the industry at even a more, I would say, accelerated pace than we've already seen. I don't know if many of you are familiar, I'll just give a little plug, but I think it's on May 6th is the date. We will actually have achieved 1 million solar installations in the United States. And it's taken something like 10 years to get there, but they expect to get to 2 million in the next 2 to 3 years. So you can see that that is going to be incredible in terms of how do we get there.
So if you want to go ahead to the next one. I'm not going to cover this in any great detail, but it's going to be provided to you afterwards just in case you're interested in some information about SEA. And more than anything, the goal of SEA is to build the strongest solar industry in the United States. And that's through advocacy, through collaboration, through education. It is through looking at market barriers. How can we grow? How can we grow, quickly, in a way that benefits everybody? Explaining to the public. We have a consumer protection angle that's also very important, that we've seen a lot of things come up in the last couple of years that we're addressing. SEA committees prior to this, the Codes and Standards Working Group, corporate social responsibility, but to really find a way for them to elevate their concerns of what they were facing in terms of how do we help solar grow. It's almost like an industry within an industry, if you will. And so the desire to create a segment group focused just on mounting systems became very apparent, and so we're very pleased that the members stepped forward and said, please help us. So we're also happy to do that. Unfortunately, in the last week or so, we had a change in chair, so we're actually going to be in the process of re-electing a new chair of the committee, but our vice chair who stepped up is Keith Lips from S5. S5. Unfortunately, he couldn't be at the meeting today, but I did want to express also appreciation to everybody for inviting us to come and introduce ourselves to you. And you all know Jeff. He is our Codes and Standards liaison. Essentially, when that working group works on things, such as right now the ICC Group B proposals that all just happened in Louisville. I was not there myself. I know John was there. However, it was a marathon. Like you guys, you've done Netflix, binging. You could have binged on the ICC codes. It was webcast, both tracks, from 5 a.m. Pacific time all the way till sometimes 10 o'clock Pacific. And
we actually went to 11:30 on a couple days.
Yeah, well, I know one group went till like midnight Eastern time, and yeah, I did my best on that one. But there was a lot of things that happened there that between both the mounting systems group and the Codes and Standards working group, there has to be a lot of collaboration to make sure that, again, everybody's aware of what's being implemented and how it's going to affect and impact their business and their growth. So that's really important. So we appreciate that Jeff kind of takes those issues back and forth for us, but also following the results of what happened in Louisville, we are also going to be forming a few task groups to kind of look at, okay, what do we do next? Because some of those things will go into the public comment phase, and then some of them have assembly votes for membership that has to be addressed, and so on. And then in terms of the SEA staff lead, if you have any questions, any more questions about MSMC going forward or anything comes up, you can also contact me directly. I can put you in touch with the right person for the committee. So why was the committee formed? Essentially, when the members came to SEA, they did say that there was a definite need for the segment to have some focus and to have a collective voice. So that not only were they part of the solutions that were being put forward as a segment, but that their very unique perspective was taken into account. And in an industry that is growing, sometimes it's hard for different manufacturers who have very specific needs, you know, dollar safety, workforce development, training. There's a lot of things that are covered at a much broader level that in general affect everybody, but they may not see that benefit directly. So they're saying, help us figure out what those things are. And SEA was a good platform to do it because it's also a national platform. So there's an opportunity for us to learn from each other. And then I already mentioned later, definitely the importance of the segment in the industry is very clear because you can have, I think, all of the high-tech inverters that you want. You can have all of the smart systems that you want, but if you cannot get that system to stay on a rooftop or, you know, stay mounted safely, you know, it's really not going to operate for you very effectively. I thought you were putting like a time limit on me.
No. I just remembered I was going to forget something.
For about 25 years. We were just talking earlier that I think my third day at UL, he taught an orientation.
She was subjected to a class of mine.
So I was exposed early on.
So now you can have sympathy for it. Everybody can now have sympathy for it.
Exactly.
Subjected is a better term.
So in terms of scope, it's a very wide scope as far as within the product, the segment itself, what the group has concerns about or would like to address, everything, residential, commercial, utility, all types of mounting systems themselves from ground to rooftop. And then again, as I mentioned, working very closely with the Codes and Standards group. And sometimes I think it's funny, we've been sending out a lot of information and updates to both groups, and because there's actually more information being shared, I think sometimes they go, okay, wait, is this from Codes and Standards or is this from MSMC, which has to be they put on? But I think the fact that there's communication is a big positive. Okay, so we can move to the next one. So focus areas. So the kind of four main areas that the group is also very focused on in terms of driving the activity that we pull together and get involved in. One is clearly about promoting clarity and what we call cost-effective standardization. Not only in policy and with all the stakeholders, these are the conversations that we want to open and have, but in standards, in building codes, in all regulations that are being formed today, so that it's understood not only by the mounting systems manufacturers that have to comply with them, but the impact of those are well understood by the authorities who are requiring them. So how do they have a voice? And that really gets to the third point, I'll skip ahead a little bit, is we want that to be a collaborative discussion. We want that to be a dialogue and a two-way communication. And it's really important because, again, the ability for this segment to grow, in order for us to reach 2 million installations in just a few short years, you know, we really clearly need to have a good conversation and to have plans that work for everyone. I already mentioned the group is going to be working heavily in terms of helping provide input into building and electrical codes and the product standards themselves. Not everyone, not every company has the ability or the resources to be a direct member of some of the UL standards technical panels. We recognize that clearly. It is a huge investment, time, effort, and talent to do that. And so we also want to provide those organizations with a voice still, even if they can't, you know, sit at that table.
There's also space too on the STPs. There can only be so many of them too.
Correct. And so the STPs themselves have a requirement by ANSI that there's a certain percentage allotted to different parts of the industry, so regulatory authorities, manufacturers, certifiers, etc. So the manufacturers can't dominate the complete makeup of it, but if collectively we're able to be at the table, that's also important. And then also another important focus area is developing training and education on installation best practices and procedures, which I think the SEAC group is also very focused on. So I think that's a natural area for us to maybe discuss. Is there an opportunity to collaborate in that respect and really take the work or work with you on what you have completed and say, is this applicable for on a nationwide basis, or can we, as a committee, help you improve upon it even further? And we definitely see that as an opportunity. So that actually is a segue to the last slide, and then I think we'll just open it up to questions or comments. You know, as with all of SEA's committees, you know, open, transparent dialogue, utilizing some of the platforms and processes that exist to help elevate the work that is being done today, so that it is very much to everyone's benefit is a focus for us. We do want to engage industry in the solutions and not just in identifying the problem areas. We think there's an opportunity for us to work collectively in that. And then at the same time, making sure that we're engaging other stakeholders as well in some of those solutions. Because it's interesting, having spent 25 years with UL, sometimes I feel even myself, I've only scratched the surface of what it means to work in the codes and standards arena. There's such a myriad of what needs to be learned to become even what would be considered a well-formed practitioner. And I would point to folks like George Hacker, to Bill Brooks, to Mark Dargett, to John Berdner. These guys have been able to devote a good amount of their career to really learning how to work within this infrastructure. But a lot of the folks who are members of SEA, especially manufacturers, they're really trying to focus on what they do best, and so they may not have that ability. So one of my areas that I'd be addressing SEA is how do we bring those two worlds together in a way that is very effective and hopefully helps produce the next John Hacker. Or
oh, no. No, they took them one of a kind.
Well, yeah, the next John Hughes, right?
Help us.
Okay.
We'll make it on.
So, but I think that's another important thing.
Oh, I know.
So that's really what we wanted to cover today. We wanted to introduce our committee to you, to let you know that we are a resource. You guys are a resource as well. We'd like to find ways to work collaboratively so that we can have that open dialogue and discussion, and then kind of walk down this path together. And so you can help us do another million in 2 years. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen, for being here today, and many other members of MSMC. And I hope this made us remind me, speaking on your behalf, you mentioned a unique perspective. So, you know, we have SEAC manufacturers, installers, AHJs, utilities, fire, and everybody. Testing.
Thank you very much. I was waiting to see if you get there.
Well, I know you were going to point it out. So this is a great opportunity because we hear all those unique perspectives. You know, even the discussion this morning from the utility versus installer, and you get those different perspectives and we learn from each other. And that's the beauty of it. You know, it's just really learning from each other. And you know, I remember first time we had this meeting here, and I saw Jim sitting next to Frank Miller with Frank Miller of Marengo. And here's two competitors, right? And they were talking to each other, and there's exchange of ideas happening. I go, wow, that's marvelous.
good alliance.
Maybe, I don't know. It was collaboration, there was communication happening, and so that's the beauty of people coming together and kind of, you know, taking off your jacket and relaxing a little bit, and hey, let's just talk and let's just solve problems. You know, sometimes it takes a while to get there, and but
it might not be pretty getting there.
Yeah.
But you gotta get there.
We'll get there. We'll get there. So thank you very much, and open up to comments, questions.
So I didn't see in the presentation, but I assume that you'll be having Paula provide us with your contact information, your email. I don't know if I saw it. Did I see it? Oh, there it is. Next slide, which hadn't been shown yet. Got it.
Oh, and last thing, sorry, we're going to. So we're struggling with our mission statement, and then I just said faster, cheaper, quicker, faster, cheaper. Something like that.
Those were all in there. Yeah.
Right. So the cheaper, you know, or easier. I think cheaper was in there, and that's actually, you know, for the private sector, that's a huge, huge deal. So we've got to keep that in mind. So whatever the codes, the regulations, requirements out there, we've got to keep all those perspectives in mind because one can impact the other, and we've got to just be able to balance those things the way we want it.
And hopefully there would be a balance of minimum safety in there as well.
Safety is
So I
critical,
think
yes.
that's why we use.
Because I didn't hear that when you said that.
All I
hear was cheaper and faster.
Just like safety.
Safety is critical, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, Stan Holman from Solar. I got started with this with Siemens about 18 years ago, and I want to put this in perspective. I think my company had 100% of all rooftop installations in America. We were shipping to the Northeast, Florida, everywhere, and our total sales were $35,000. So it didn't look good.
Good food, isn't it?
I'd just like to say, since I am a member of SEAC and I serve on UL's 2703 Standard Technical Panel, and I'm part of the Mounting System Manufacturers Committee, that I know there's a lot of folks that are here at this meeting for the first time, and my position is that we've all seen the industry grow dramatically over the past few years. We've seen the permitting questions and challenges grow dramatically over the past few years, and quite honestly, I don't know of any other forum in the industry that allows manufacturers and installers and building officials to talk to one another in a non-threatening environment about productive items and issues. And I really hope that many of the folks that are here for the first time can attend again in the future, because one of the benefits I feel of communicating with building officials, and there's a lot of heavy hitters here in this room today. If you don't quite know, these guys, you got Mustafa Kashe and Bazad Ghazadi from City of LA, and David McLean from the City of LA, and Pete Jackson, who's, you know,
he just went over Sparky.
I was just wondering, because Calabasas get as much notoriety as Bakersfield in LA. And that's a good thing, Sparky. But for what it's worth, Sparky does some tremendous work with this group. But the important thing about this this monthly meeting is that you can talk with these really significant building officials when there's not a permit on the line. I think that most of, and I know the case for me and the work I do at Quick Mount PV, before SEAC, the only time that a building official became a topic of conversation is when there was a permit that you had a problem with, and the conversation was contentious to start with. So I think this is a very productive way for our industry sector to really influence positive change for the long term. And I was talking with Tom Young from Unirac earlier, that while there is time you have to invest coming here and spending time in this meeting and working in these committees, compare that to all the one-off issues that you have to address. This is a way for us to avoid those future one-off issues. So I would encourage all of you to participate in these meetings in the future, because I will say for Quick Mount PV, the time that's been spent here is the single best thing I've spent my time on codes and standards outside of the UL task group work.
So and wonderful words there, Jeff, on that. I want to make sure, though, in my opinion, or in my viewpoint, SEAC it's a working committee kind of thing, and the situation, there are other venues that I do not see the industry take advantage of near enough. And you and I have talked about this, and we're going to bring it up tomorrow in a task group meeting to try to get more involvement. There are two organizations that, one is ICC, International Code Council, the other is IAI, International Association of Electrical Inspectors. In the state of California, there are 4 IAI chapters scattered throughout, and then there's some divisions as well. In fact, several of the officers of those IAI chapters are in the room. I mean, there's Pat, there's Tiffany, there's myself, Gillard has been an officer at a time, Pete, we're on down the line. And so there's IAI and there's ICC, and ICC has they have 29 chapters, I believe, in the state of California. Anybody can go to those chapter meetings. Anybody can go in there and can bring up questions. And it is, again, it's an opportunity for you to meet with these code officials and to have those dialogues in a non-threatening environment. I'd say no different. And there's always an education program. In fact, the education program for the Northern California chapter, I know since I'm the vice chair, is going to be, in May, is going to be on energy storage systems. And so 2 hours of a presentation. And it's actually given by a manufacturer. So that manufacturers can go in and present on subjects as well. So I would encourage you to consider getting involved in those organizations. I will gladly put together, because I go to all of these, not all 29, I have been at one time or another, but I will be more than happy to put down that information so that you guys can avail yourself of, know when those meetings are, where to go, and to try to go to them to make yourself
If you want to share that with me, we're actually pulling together a committee calendar.
I'll be more than happy. I'm doing it for, I'm doing it for CalSEA, and I'll also do it for SEA because I know the national as well.
So real quick add on to that, for those that are CalSEA members, tomorrow we are having our Codes and Standards Committee where John is going to provide us with some strategic
suggestions on how to make the most out of your time of going.
Yeah, so we definitely want to engage the ICC. We want to engage the IAEI, which every time I hear it sounds like a Warner Brothers hit their rabbit in the head with frying pan acronym. But we will be focusing how the CalSEA members can recruit from within our membership to attend these meetings and funnel this information back to CalSEA so we can have a productive impact on California codes and standards.
Perfect. Yeah, just to back up what Jeff is saying and also what John's saying is, for instance, I'll use myself as an example. We process up to 200 residential PV permits per week in my jurisdiction, and they all go through me. So you could wait till you get a complaint from somebody and chase down one permit and find out what the argument is and reach me, or you can come to events like this or some of the others we've mentioned and talk to me about all 200 all at once in essence. So it's a good point. It's far more productive. And I'm very glad to see this group formed and Evelyn to be working with them because there's been more confusion from my perspective in regard to mounting methods over the last year and a half than any other aspect of the residential PV market that I'm coming across. So it's well, we haven't got the rapid shutdown yet. Well needed. So thank you.
I just want to reach out to any of the committee members that are here. If they have anything they want to add to the conversation. I think the fact that they're here, they're interested, it is a sign of, the collaborate.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think also just to quickly add a point, thank you, Jeff, for talking so highly of SEAC. And I know that when we first started, especially in startup, the vision was, there's going to be this tsunami of solar coming on board, and we'd really like to prepare for it. So I think what SEAC, or what I believe SEAC have done is taken a very preventative role, and not necessarily totally corrective. So respectfully, I'm just saying that, that is a lot of the work that we do here, is a lot of preventative issues.
I'd like to add one thing, and CalSEA probably plays a role in this, is what I've seen with local building requirements. I've been involved with ICC, IAI for 30 years now. I just got my 30-year award a couple months ago.
point, actually, Dave Clement is a good friend of mine. I've known him for a long time. He's the
Executive Director.
executive director.
Oh, CEO, yeah.
CEO of
II.
That'd be a greatest thing for us to also collaborate on, because I'm sure as all the mounting systems manufacturers know, you could cross state lines and the requirements are different for installers, right? And then how they're viewed by regulatory authorities, whether or not they're to even go with what state required is a completely different ballgame as well. So an opportunity for the mounting systems manufacturers to also collaborate, even at the IAEI level, would be very powerful. So Dave, he and I served on a
This committee is the goal is to expand beyond where we are today, meaning all of California, is it inclusive of all of California? Good question, because that would be nice. Okay, I'm going to give my personal opinion here. So, yes, it was started by the county, but we're not thinking LA County. I mean, if you go back and look at some of the 8021, 88 issues that apply to all of California, right? The utility issues, are they local? Are they broader? It could be much broader. And when you talk about Bill 2703, well, exactly. So we're hoping, it's going back to my vision, is that what comes out of here is not just local recommendations. That hopefully it could benefit the industry much broader, and that the discussion kind of keeps that high level view of the issues, and those recommendations will hopefully benefit more than just folks like within. So is there a boundary? Only what we do. Yeah, exactly.
Just to add to what Hector is saying is that I've already given him the informal invite. I just haven't sent him the formal invitation to come to the Tri-Chapter, ICC Tri-Chapter annual meeting, which is in Santa Cruz on the second Friday of June, June 10th. I know it's on your calendar because we talked about it, but anyway, that he is on the program to explain to his peers in the Bay Area about introduce them to what SEAC is, what a SEAC does, and how they can participate and be a part of this overall process. So it's quite a bit for him to, I mean, when you consider all of how many different state agencies we have talking on numerous subjects, he's got a half hour that's devoted on solar.
And who would be?
And I'm the chair of I'm the one who arranges the meeting agenda. So.
I'm sorry, who's going to be going? What's that meeting for?
It's the ICC Tri-Chapters annual meeting.
Cool.
It's the Peninsula, East Bay, and Monterey Bay. We always meet in either the first or second Friday of June in Santa Cruz.
Thank you.
And if you're interested in attending, I'll send you the invite if you want to go. And there's only 100 spaces for people to attend.
Might be tough for me, but I'm glad to see that you're getting Hector there for sure.
A key point I just want to make sure everyone's clear on, whether we're local or statewide, we only can provide recommendations. Yep. None of us here are writing code or standards, and not everyone in the room may even agree with recommendations. So it's just a body to discuss items and recommend solutions, but we have no authority.
But it's important to recognize that the building officials, the significant building officials in Southern California, are so much more involved in the standards development process than I don't think I can name a single building official in Northern California that's on.
Rhonda Parkhurst is on CSC4.
I haven't seen her at a UL 2703 meeting in about 2 years now. So the point again is that Pete's correct. We are only making recommendations, but my feeling is the recommendations that come out of Southern California have significant weight.
I think CalCEA could be having to help promote content as well.
And indeed, that's the reason why Mustafa originally roped me into this process, is because I think he recognized that CalCEA would be an ally to helping spread this information, and absolutely, for sure.
And I don't know what we're doing there, but maybe we could do something in that as well to help promote it.
Yeah, absolutely, and I guess we'll continue that conversation. Hector will. Hector, I think, has done a very good job of trying to herd these cats because we are not the most herdable cats.
Yeah, sometimes you're like,
Wow. That was so epic. It was funny. Can we get a recording of that?
I want to go back.
YouTube's coming up.
I want to go back to something that Paul said. Our list of to-do is quite long, and the time these folks put in is hugely appreciated. And it takes us time to, it's one word at a time sometimes. And it takes us a while. And,
we took it over.
Yeah, look at you. So Paula mentioned this morning that resources are needed and help. Ideally, if we have maybe 2 or 3, maybe 4 at the most people that are willing to take these issues and actually write them outside of the committee, this independent group that has some experience, so it doesn't take your time, and then we can bring that forward. So that's kind of our ideal scenario. So if anybody has any suggestions or folks that can volunteer, and that means time.
and that's what we'll also do, Michelle and I, is actually monitor the Google Docs. And when we notice that a lot of collaboration is taking shape, actually by the likes of John and Keith, who like to, look at documents. So one when it's in, it's like a real good state.
That's nitpicky wordsmithers, I think.
Yeah.
So
Google Docs is really nice.
Well, thank you again, Evelyn, and thank you for the rest of it. Going on to the next item, stop of rerouting the solar.
The last SEAC meeting, we handed out the ECM from the county on the reroute for building code manual that we handed out to you guys. Any comment on that? Anything? I know we had discussed a few inputs from few members regarding as far as having a system, and I'm going to do a reroute. I need to take that system down, put it back on. Okay, what permit is required? So we had some discussion. Members, anybody has any input, anything that you guys want to discuss, anything that you guys want to email me?
Just a comment for you, Mustafa, is that just a couple of days ago for ICC hearings, there was a proposal that was made specifically to the International Existing Building Code, which is where Chapter 34 of the Building Code got basically picked out and dumped into this separate code, and that's what you're now going to have from now on. In there was a proposal, EB2-16, I'll give you the link directly for it, that was proposed for how do you put PV on existing roofs and dealing with the re-roofing issue as well. So you may want to, shall we say, reach forward in time, grab the proposal requirements and see about whether some things there are of value to you to bring up now.
So you think is it closer to what we put out? Is that something that
I have not had the chance to sit down and take yours, that, and do a comparison. I'm just bringing it up as a suggestion that if there is some, if you want to take a look at, because there may be some wording or some ideas in there that you might go, hey, I'd like that as a policy, or bring that. That would also be helpful to the industry, because as I recall, that was an industry proposal, a sponsored proposal for doing that, because they felt that there was not clarity in the code already.
Right now, we have some applicants. They have really going and asking us, what is the county policy? What's your policy? I want to come in, they want to pull a permit, they want to remove the solar system, they want to re-roof the roof and then put the solar system back on. So we had to come up with something right away to get it going. And I think we're pretty much working with the industry as far as if you can show us there's a proof set of plans, if you can show us that there is some evidence that it was permitted before, we work with you. But if you don't, before we take the system down, take some pictures, show some documents, and then take the system down, pull the permit, go put it back on, and then we come out and verify it.
Yeah, and like Evelyn had noted earlier, is that there are these proposals that are out there. The committee, the code development committees have already taken action on them, but that means there's still the final action hearing, the public comment hearing, excuse me, that's going to be in October. And there are opportunities to make public comment up to, I think it's around July 21st, or somewhere in that vicinity. And I would suggest that those who have an interest in this would want to also look at that, even though it's not something that's going to be adopted tomorrow, it's going to be what's going to be coming down the future, and you're going to want to have it, and maybe it's grabbing some of the good work you've got in here, Mustafa, and putting that in public comment, suggesting, hey, let's make some modifications. So then it's in a model code, and it's not just something that is utilized here, but also elsewhere.
So we're hoping that eventually we work this thing into the SEAC, and this becomes the SEAC implementation rather than, okay, well, we know what the county is doing. So part of it, as a SEAC member, I'd like to get this thing done and get approved by our members. Yes, definitely, absolutely. So we're going to definitely put it on the future agenda to be discussed.
Can you describe the permitting and inspection process you're envisioning? I didn't see any real detail to that. How do you think this is going to play out when you, so somebody's going to apply for a permit to remove, before the PV system's removed, they'd have to get a permit. Is that correct?
So we want people before removing the system, okay, to take a picture or photo of the items that we run, they're not going to be run here. Then you come to our counter and apply for the permit. We will issue him a building permit. We will charge him for a building permit, but we will not charge him for electrical permit. But we will issue an electrical permit to them, and we only will charge them $29 issuing fee for electrical. There will be no electrical fee per se, only issuing permit for electrical, and then it would be full-blown building permit for the re-roof.
And how much does it cost for that?
It's going by the evaluation of how much it's going to cost to change the formula. So based on the evaluation, yeah. So I could get it to you guys how much it is.
Yeah, I'd be interested in seeing that. And then, yeah, I see you asked for photos of the PV modules, but if you haven't removed the PV module, knowing what that module is oftentimes a function of the label. It might be difficult with older modules to get a real clear idea. So you're asking for the PV module model number. Right. That might be a little tricky before you remove it.
Well, you could take one, remove one module, take a picture, put it next to the array, take a picture, and then that will. You just want to get some kind of evidence to what's there is going to go back on.
And then as far as inspection is concerned, how do you see that playing out?
As for inspection, we're going to be doing inspection for re-roof. We're going to be doing inspection for, I've been doing re-roof, we're going to do inspection for the PV.
So would there be two inspections?
No, it could be on a single one. Because by the time the contractor leaves our door step, that system is being removed, the roof is being on, and then the system is back on.
So when the inspector goes, the PV system is mounted, the roof's on.
We could do both of them, absolutely. I should not be a separate inspection call for you. No.
What do you, if just for argument's sake, let's say you had a 2,000 square foot home with a single story with a 5 kW PV system. What do you envision the permit cost for something of that nature, ballpark figure?
It's the evaluation
under 200 or over 200?
For re-roof as well? Or
well, you would be re-roofing and removing and reinstalling PV systems.
It would be more than that. The re-roof is a bit more, just the re-roof for building portion of it.
And there subdivide. There's a, even if there was no PV installed, there's a cost for the re-roof.
Yes, I don't know that.
That's independent from what.
That's already required in LA County to re-roof. You have to have a permit.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I think pretty much any jurisdiction that I
be anywhere.
It requires when you do a re-roof, you need a permit, but I could be wrong.
Not in Arizona, but obviously.
Arizona, I don't know.
When I re-roofed, I didn't need a permit.
If you look at the policy, it won't be PV and won't be other PV.
Okay.
It's part of your package. So the difference is required if you don't have the PV and you do the re-roof, the building permit is required.
Okay, I understand part one and part two. Okay.
As far as your electrical
Hey, Jeff, I think I think unless it's explicitly exempt from a permit under the administrative portions of the building code, everything requires a building permit, including re-roofs, any sort of electrical installation, anytime you remodel or repair anything, unless it's explicitly exempt from the building code, you have to require a permit for it.
Mustafa, you want to put the future agenda?
Yes, please.
And the timing to move forward with this?
As soon as possible. We're getting, at least in the past couple of months or so, I have but 10 of them.
Yeah, there's a couple of wording changes might be better, but we could chat about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other comments or questions on that? I know probably you haven't read this, so Mustafa, open comment?
Yes, of course.
Excellent. All of it.
And we'll share all the presentations and the documents with everyone after the meeting.
We seem to move a lot faster after lunch. Maybe we should have lunch when we get here tomorrow.
The horses are smelling the barn is what they're doing.
One other quick question, if we're going to go forward, I see that you're referencing the standoff locations per the California Solar Permitting Guidebook.
Right.
But if it's an existing PV system where the standoffs would be reusable, flashings would be reusable.
We will accept it, no problem.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Because it doesn't reference that in number 2 on page 26. It just says standoff locations shall comply with table 1 of attachment E, and it's rare that you would find a system that went in before the new AB 2188 streamlined permitting process that you would see attachments like are found on page 28.
Right. You are not going to be, okay, so pretty much that would be in case that remove the system without getting, have us the pictures or videos and to us. Then we're going to go it back into to verify.
Okay, so that might require a little rewording to let them know if you have an existing system that was previously permitted that you can use the same standoffs in the same location.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, and note that it only has to comply with that checklist when the roof covering is going to be different. I mean, it obviously makes sense that you're going to have a totally different mount than,
I got you,
if you're going from shingle to tile.
Yeah, okay. So
if you change that, that's a different story.
Yeah, agreed.
That is a different story.
And I imagine that's going to be a different permitting or a different inspection process. Yeah.
Anything else on that? Anybody? Okay, so last item on the agenda is open forum feedback. Anybody have questions, comments? Yes. I have a question for the UL people here.
All one of us?
Jeff speaks about this as well as Terry Cavanaugh, who served on the mechanical committee and the bonding committee. As they said, I went through the UL process about 16, 17 years ago with Siemens. And that was 1703, and they were doing the Earthstate kits, which went into LA City. And the load requirement for uplift was 30 pounds, 50% safety factor, or 45-pound load test. I reload tested all my conditions of load Intertech, and then I'm told you only need 5 pounds with a 50% safety factor. In other words, we've gone backwards by 1/6 of the upward load. And my structural engineer won't even touch that. So in other words, this minimum requirement for the state of California is 110 miles an hour. That's 30 PSI for uplift condition, safety factor 45. We spent days at Energetic, loading 6 times the amount of weight because I wanted to be consistent with what we've produced for the last 16 years. What we have right now is a condition that is not theoretical. I wouldn't put 5 pounds per square foot in Lancaster, Palmdale, or anywhere else. So we have a flaw in the system, I believe. And for anybody who was in business on January 17th of 1994, anything that wasn't bolted down is gone. That was a Northridge earthquake. Anything that wasn't bolted to a rafter took off. Freeways got trashed up. So we now have a code that says it's okay to test at 1/6 of
we were testing for in 1999. I want to know how that got into code and how to fix it.
Well, it's in the standards, not in the code. And it's not that you can't, you can list your product as low as 5 PSF. I don't know anybody's doing that.
Okay, Jeff, I understand what you're saying, because Terry said the same thing. You go into plan check, a plan checker is okaying it, he sees the UL 2703,
and that's 5
PSF
up
on it, and you have a product that could be tested at 5 pounds per square foot.
Upward.
Upward, yeah,
Upward,
that's the only condition that counts.
Well, you've got downward too, but...
No, downward, it doesn't fall through the roof. It blows off the roof and hurts people.
But again, you know, and I'm not going to disagree with you. Personally, I feel 5 PSF is unnecessarily low, and I definitely believe that this is an issue for us to address with Terry Kavanaugh and the
I think it's an issue we address with UL, building the and everyone else. So I want to talk about it in a private conversation. I did insurance work for probably 7 years after thermal, and that's all we did was replace things that didn't stand on the roof. LA County, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, you could glue it to the roof. There was no code requirement whatsoever for attachment. LA City, same thing. Keep the flow 18 inches. Gravity was fine with them. I don't want to see our industry disintegrate like it did after the thermal debacle.
So if I made 2 quick things, or maybe 3. One is John Tacker, UL, and I'm more than happy to talk with you. But I would say this. One is that there's, just to make sure everybody's clear, UL has only 1 vote on the standard technical panel. There are numerous other people who have votes on the standard technical panel. So it's what UL is facilitating, in other words, providing the framework, the forum for developing of the standard. And thus, you know, much that we would love to influence certain things that go into that standard. I mean, and we try as best we can, but no different than any other interested party. So I would encourage you to consider putting together proposals if you feel that what's within UL 2703 is not sufficient. And I'd be more than happy to work with you to help you in how to get those proposals into the to be considered by the standard technical panel. There's several standard SCP members here. I'm sitting next to one. I see one across the way here. I see a couple in here. So that's one. 2 is that on the loading it's not just what's in the standard that I think you want to, that it sounded like you were concerned about. I think I was hearing that you were concerned about ballasted PV systems.
No, I don't have a problem.
Okay, that was okay. So but you're concerned about how the wind loading is determined. I just had several days of sleep deprivation in Louisville, Kentucky, before the IPC structural committee, where there were, I was just counting them up. There's 1, 2, 3. There's about a dozen proposals, some of them competing proposals regarding how to just deal with the wind resistance and wind loading just on PV systems, period. Nothing else about PV. And some of them, I think a lot of them were either defeated or 1 or 2 I think made it. And what I would encourage people, like I said earlier, is to get involved in the process. Any of us in this room can make public comments and say, no, we don't agree with this, or you forgot this, you should have passed this, or whatever, or even if you want a modification. A lot of what they're doing is based off of what's been done in the ASCE 7 in the 2016 edition. And so I would encourage you to consider being involved. I can tell you right now that many of those proposals came from SEA. And SEA, so SEA had a number of proposals in there that were to address these types of issues. And SEA had a representative, Joe Kane, who's the chair of the standards committee for SEA, was there. In fact, he was sitting about 6 feet away from where I was sitting. in the room, and we were talking quite a bit on these proposals. Anyway, I would suggest that if you have those interests and concerns, one, you could put them in yourself. Also, you can work through, if you're a member of SEAC, I know that they would be more than happy to have more people interested in putting that through. And actually, there were, and if I may, just one last thing is that overall, you heard Evelyn say it, you heard me say it, I'm going to say it again. You guys need to think out that the world is not just the National Electrical Code for what you have. It is also the building code, the fire code, and also the energy code too. There were code hearings that probably nobody really started paying attention to, but there were 38 PV proposals. There were 9 energy storage system proposals that were heard in the last couple of days. I testified on about half of those. And what I would suggest is that pay attention to it, because that's what's going to be, those for the 2018 versions of the fire code and the building code. And let's see, 2018, which that means it will be your 2019 California fire code, California building code. And if you're not there at the table, if you haven't addressed it, it'll be a little too late.
Yeah, I guess my point was, whoever created the UL standard 16 years ago, it was a great standard. Nothing came off. Everything was fine. Somehow we are diluted by 1/6. So the building departments should know that the standard is flawed, and you're not even meeting state of California requirements by 1/6.
So I'm not. I can appreciate your concern there, but I wouldn't say that the standard is flawed.
Sure it is.
What I would say is that the standard sets a particular point, and what the thing is that really what it comes down to when you're figuring out the proper wind loading is the wind loading is, bottom line, it's not determined just by this one test of stagnant test of putting on weight. It's also the engineer of record needs to be doing calculations.
Most of what we're talking about is theoretical. My experience for 6 years is dealing with the damage of systems that were not installed properly. That's not theoretical. They take out cars and other problems. And I'm not talking about a flat roof with wind deflectors that have gone through wind tunnel testing. I'm talking about residential rooftops that if you hit every rafter, you could put, I went to the San Francisco show. There were racking manufacturers with support rails. I wouldn't trust to hold up a shower curtain. And they probably could pass this code. So I'm just saying, before we get into the big mess that we have in the thermal industry where we have no controls, we are just dwelling in a lot of theoretical stuff that's good, I'll comply, but we're missing the big elephant in the room, and that's, it doesn't matter if it's grounding, if it's landing on someone's house. To give an example, the system was put in high school in Pasadena. Somehow they got a hold of one of our engineering reports. It wasn't our system, but they used it. That system came off and blew in an area where kids would have been. It just happened to blow off on a Sunday. Okay? So I'm saying that 5 miles an hour is a joke. Fix it.
Well, and indeed, I agree with you, Stan, and there is a process, and that's what I'm encouraging you to get involved with. Terry Kavanaugh is the task group leader, mechanical loading, and your concerns are well placed. I endorse them. And what I would propose is that we take the proper corrective action to address those. So to express your concerns here is valid. You're making more people aware of it.
I vented. I'm happy.
But what I encourage you to one step further. Go and get involved in the code development process.
Don't stop now.
But I think something. Local jurisdiction. Local jurisdiction, if they identify that there's a standard, they don't necessarily have to accept that.
But the issue is not with the standard. The issue is with the ASCE 7.
So the message here is just get engaged. And thank you for bringing that up. Glad you vented. You feel good?
We've got a new link to our website called vent.com.
So on a totally separate note, some people have asked me about energy storage systems. There were two proposals that were accepted as modified by the code committees that are of keen interest to you. On energy storage systems, RB 171-16 and F95-16. F95 puts energy storage systems and all that you need of how much and in what locations, what limitations there are into the fire code. And that's solely because the building code was not in place for that portion. It will take care of it, get corrected in the next cycle for the 2021, so don't worry about that. But it will be in the California code. The RB 171 puts it for residential in the International Residential Code. Where do you find this information? ICCSafe.org, and look at the and right there in the beginning on the front page, it talks about the 2016 code hearings in the middle of the screen. Click on that, and it will lead you to the monograph, and you can read them yourself.
Thank you. John, thank you for sharing that.
I will send it to Paula, and she can distribute it wherever she wishes.
And online?
Can you chime in on what John had said? John, you said that something about the adopted codes, and you mentioned the building code and yada yada, and you were discussing ASCE 7 earlier, right before that. So when you adopt the building code, you actually, Chapter 16 directs you to ASCE 7. That provides your design criteria as directed by Chapter 16 of the building code. So not only are you adopting the building codes, you're adopting other manuals such as the ASCE 7 as an adopted ordinance because your building code directs you to that document.
That is correct. That Chapter 16 references ASCE 7, requires compliance with ASCE 7, but it has also in Chapter 16 of the International Building Code has very specific requirements for ballasted PV systems and other types of PV systems. And so there was discussion as to whether to leave that in the building code or rip that out because of the reference to ASCE 7 and just rely on what's in 7. So that is, again, why I suggest that people take a good look, make sure that what happens, the end result, is what they want. Because we can discuss all day we want here, but the thing is what ends up happening and what goes into the code, that's of prime concern. Get involved.
Get involved. Okay. Any other comments, questions? Anybody? Last words?
Our next meeting is going to be on May the 26th, and I know that that's close to Memorial Day weekend, so we want to find out in advance if there's going to be any conflict.
To do what again?
To attend our next meeting on May the 26th. If there's going to be any major conflict.
I won't be around. She said May 26th.
Yeah, it's a Thursday before Memorial.
August will be a fun one too because it's right at the end of the section meeting.
Anything else?
Okay, so May 26th we fine with it. Okay. All right, and then obviously we'll continue our utility issue work on Google Docs, and I've sort of added a couple more emails today.
And then Jim wants to bring the small group together.
Yes, so Jim and I will talk offline about this. And then we're still putting together the utility scale code manual.
Oh yeah, thank you. Okay, so utility scale solar manuals. This is a big item on the to-do list. Again, it was started with LA County. We have some big projects that were coming up, especially in the Antelope Valley. And initially, it was incredible headbutting, very difficult. And over time, it has evolved, and working with some really good developers, owners, it's been a tremendous lessons learned. And the idea is to, I'm going to call it a manual, you can call it a cookbook, guidelines, that if somebody wants to come and do business in LA County, they have everything laid out. The entitlement process, land development process, permitting process, and technical issues clearly laid out. So it makes it easy for folks to schedule and finance their projects and really have an understanding and look for ways to streamline, make things easier, especially for all the lessons learned. So there's been a lot of interest, and the county now has what they call the Office of Sustainability, and the folks there are very, very interested in putting a manual together. In fact, they told me
about a couple months, they may have funding available, which is great, and some staff to help out. And there's also some other folks in the private sector that definitely have interest and want to bring information, all the lessons learned. So this has taken a while to evolve. So hopefully in the next couple months we'll have kind of the scope, the big items that should be in this manual, and then make a decision how to actually build it. You know, it's going to go out RFPs, building in-house, work with some experts. So hopefully this move a little bit faster, just because I think it would be a great thing. And then if somebody wants to take, when this product is done, somebody wants to take it and apply it to other areas, or maybe you can word this document that's a little more generic. We're glad to do that, but that's coming down.
Yeah, you soliciting information right now from people, or do you want us to, we had an internal meeting to discuss all of the topics that we have with interest. You want to send that to you?
Yeah, send it to me. Don't get into the nitty-gritty for more of a high-level stuff.
Just more like an outline of what you thought.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's what we need right now.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Anything else? Anybody? Okay. Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you for your patience, and have a great weekend.
Thanks, folks. Have a good one.
Yeah.